attention to the launch failure across the ocean? Because their own rocket is set to launch in one day? Why look at someone else's child when they have their own treasure? The news of the failure of the manned lunar launch vehicle and the unfortunate demise of 3 astronauts was quickly pushed down in an hour. Dominating the headlines is, of course, the launch of the Storm 9 Remote 5 from the other side, scheduled for December 13th at 7:25 a.m. Moreover, the space agency held a press conference to announce the 3 astronauts who will board tomorrow. At the press conference, Zhang Xiaoming, unable to hide his excitement, officially announced, the astronauts for this lunar man mission are Chen Dong, Nie Zheng, and Zhai Gang. 3 astronauts, dressed in their space suits and wearing excited smiles, walked up to the reporters. The sound of camera shutters filled the air. In the live broadcast room, netizens were also very excited. I told you. Chen Dong is definitely here. Zhai Gang is here too. They are both among the first batch of astronauts. Amazing. They just left Earth a few years ago. And now they are about to land on the moon. The neighbors have failed. Do you think we can succeed? Those upstairs are losing confidence. They should be taken out. We need to have faith. Although our launch schedule is tight, all the inspection processes have been completed, unlike the hurried approach seen elsewhere. Yes, we must have confidence. Dear reporters and friends who are following the lunar landing plan, Zhang Xiaoming began to speak from the podium. He looked around and waited for the reporters to quiet down. His tone was steady, like a ballast, instilling an inexplicable sense of confidence. He firmly stated, tomorrow morning, we will launch the crewed lunar landing spacecraft, which is expected to reach the moon in 3 days. The entire mission will take 20 days, and the astronauts will stay on the moon for 17 days. After the lunar landing plan, we will immediately begin the construction of a lunar base, aiming to establish a facility on the moon's surface that can support long-term astronaut habitation, laying a solid foundation for our research on the lunar environment and extraterrestrial survival technologies. As soon as he finished speaking, the reporters on site were taken aback, then began to frantically press their camera shutters. A nearby briefing officer with a laptop started typing furiously. Reports began to spread rapidly around the world. This is quite pragmatic. A lunar base. Today, on the eve of the crewed lunar landing, the head of the space agency, Zhang Xiaoming, announced that after the lunar landing, we will build a lunar base. This is a selective interpretation. Breaking news. We are going to start building a lunar base. This is an exaggerated understanding. The space agency head is full of confidence about tomorrow's lunar landing. It will surely be a success. Various reports flooded the media. The failure of the lunar landing plan elsewhere was quickly pushed to the bottom of the list. Instantly, the world's attention turned to our country. Everyone wanted to see if we could succeed where others had failed. Of course, there were also some countries with grievances against others, hoping for our success to provoke them. Time reached 7 a.m. on November 13th, just before the rocket launch. Chapter 33, Journey to the Moon. The 3 astronauts had already entered the cabin and completed all checks. The cabin was now closed, and the rocket was in its final launch sequence. Zhai, are you nervous? Chen Dong, holding the spacecraft operation manual, sounded a bit anxious. Nervous? Who wouldn't he be? This is a lunar landing. Zhai Gang chuckled, raised the manual in his hand, and said confidently, just follow the manual, and we'll surely have a great time on the moon. Lanya, what are you thinking about? Zhai Gang noticed Nie Zheng was a bit distracted and immediately inquired. Oh, I was thinking about what position to take and what to say once we go down. Nie Zheng is definitely not nervous. He has quite a bit of experience. So feeling nervous is impossible. Hee. Hearing Nie Zheng's thoughts, Zhai Gang and Chen Dong both smiled slightly. That's a good question. Let's ask Wenchang when we're on our way to the moon. Attention all units. There is 1 minute remaining until launch. Just as the 3 were chatting, a clear and crisp command rang in their ears. Upon receiving the instruction, all 3 immediately focused their attention. The astronauts do not need to do anything during the launch phase. The spacecraft is under automatic control. Only in the event of a problem would manual intervention be required. Meanwhile, on the beach in the South China Sea, a large crowd had gathered. People from all over the country, as well as groups from companies here for team-building activities, filled the entire beach. This was an exhilarating moment. The country's moon landing is destined to be recorded in history, and they had every reason to be present. In fact, on the beach, some people had set up a large screen for free. The screen was broadcasting live content. 1 minute countdown. Everyone, pay attention, 1 minute remaining. The once noisy beach fell completely silent. Everyone eagerly looked towards the towering rocket on the artificial island across the beach. 30 seconds countdown. The voice of the person giving the command was firm and powerful, inexplicably providing a sense of calm. Hearing his voice, the anxious hearts of those on the beach and in the live broadcast room settled down slightly. 10 seconds countdown. 10, 9, 8 at this moment. An estimated crowd of over 10,000 on the beach began to count down in unison with the commander. 3, 2, 1, ignite. A sudden silence enveloped the entire beach. Everyone watched the launch pad across the way. A spark of flame burst from the igniter, and the engine, rapidly spraying fuel, was ignited. The rocket engine has started. A fierce flame erupted from the nozzle. After a slight shake, the rocket steadily began to ascend. Under the watchful eyes of the nation, the rocket slowly rose, continuously accelerating. The massive roar of the engine echoed throughout the land and sky. As the rocket soared into the air, its enormous tail flame appeared as a fireball. In the sky above the South China Sea, 2 suns seemed to appear simultaneously. The rocket continued to fly steadily and had already entered the clouds, becoming indistinct to the naked eye. Therefore, everyone on the beach turned their attention to the live broadcast. In the command center, cameras mounted on the rocket's body began to provide visuals. The footage showed that the rocket was still functioning normally. Launch time, November 13th at 7:25:03. Attention all units, observe the rocket's attitude. Wenchang, optical radar tracking is normal. Yuan Wang, remote sensing signal tracking is normal. Dawn, astronaut physical condition is normal. The announcements echoed one after another, each normal chime bringing cheers from the crowd on the beach. Everyone's heart was deeply invested in the rocket. At 200 seconds, the first and second stages successfully separated. The second stage engine ignited normally. Boom. The command hall erupted with excited cheers. On the beach, people were also caught up in the celebration. The second stage engine successfully ignited. The launch was a success. The launch was a success. At 400 seconds, the spacecraft successfully entered the Earth-Moon transfer orbit, expected to arrive at the moon in 3 days. After the cheers in the command hall, everyone quickly returned to their busy work. The launch was just the beginning of the lunar landing plan. The next crucial task was to ensure the spacecraft safely landed in the designated area on the moon. So, they were all busy. However, for the people on the beach, it had turned into a paradise of celebration. Whether they knew each other or not, they embraced and cried, shouting and singing loudly. It was a success. The rocket had launched successfully. Now they just had to wait for the lunar landing in 3 days. Here they stood, waiting for 3 days. A middle-aged man holding a national flag shouted loudly at the reporter's camera in front of the tent. 3 days until the lunar landing. How could they sleep if they weren't here waiting for 3 days? Since they were too excited to sleep, they might as well stay awake, fighting until dawn. Later, by 9 o'clock, the reporters stationed there were surprised to find that out of the thousands on the beach, there were still 5,000 people present. Half of them chose to stay on the beach, setting up camp and tents to get through these challenging 3 days. At the same time, news of the successful launch of the crewed lunar rocket from the eastern nation spread wildly across the globe. The timing was just too coincidental. Just the day before, a major failure had occurred in a rival nation, and now, as a competitor, the eastern nation had succeeded. This was big news. For decades, the dominant aerospace power had always been known for its strength, yet it faced an unprecedented defeat in space. Wasn't this enough to grab attention? Meanwhile, a major earthquake struck across Europe and North America, where the once invincible nation had been defeated head-on. The myth of the nation, which had been glorified by the media as the world's unbeatable pioneer of civilization, was shattered in their minds. The myth had crumbled. The public, who had been lulled into a cocoon by the carefully woven media narratives, suddenly realized that the spiritual nation they idolized and admired could also face defeat. It turned out that the nation was not so remarkable after all. It was just like that. As for the final illusion of the Eastern nation regarding the Western counterpart, it was completely shattered as well. Without comparison, there would be no harm done. Both countries launched almost simultaneously. One succeeded while the other failed. They were the successful one. Who? I wonder who would still dare to boast about the other. Those who continue to boast about the other are simply clowns. Either they are being paid, or they are just foolish. Why foolish? Because of 500,000. He is simply not worth it. Chapter 34. Arrival on the Moon. Fang Jing didn't know how he spent the past 3 days. Excitement, insomnia, anticipation. In the underground section of the West Mountain Base, Fang Jing could see the footage from the lunar landing spacecraft through back-end permissions. In the footage, 3 astronauts were chatting and laughing. The spacecraft they were on was quite large. Within the spacecraft assembly, there was a massive activity space, equipped with ample safety redundancies and enough food supplies for a whole year, to prevent the 3 from getting too bored in space. There was even a small treadmill in the rest cabin. The 3 seemed to be in good spirits, but everyone in the country, including Fang Jing, was filled with immense worry for them. How to describe that feeling? Fang Jing felt like a worried mother. While her son was away on a trip, he was carefree. And it was the mother who was anxious. Yes, that was exactly how they felt. At the base, not just Fang Jing, but also Zhou Yuan and others, including Zhao Guangyao, rarely stopped their work, gathering in front of the television in the break room. Clearly, at that moment, any citizen was focused on this event. In this atmosphere of national tension and concern, the time finally arrived on the 16th, the day destined to be recorded in history. The moment the live broadcast started, over 100 million users flooded in. The dense barrage of comments was astonishing, making one fear that the stream would cut out at any moment. Fortunately, a miracle happened. Despite the user traffic comparable to the rush for high-speed train tickets during peak travel seasons, the server miraculously held up. In the server center, the researchers watched the fans on the servers spinning wildly and let out a long sigh of relief. It held up, thanks to the new algorithm. It really held up. Wiping away tears, they knew how overwhelming it was for their project team when they received this task. This was a nationwide sensation. When they got the assignment, they wished they could directly ask the local temple's priests to bless the server group. No server in the world could withstand such a sudden influx of users. Fortunately, those in charge were aware of the difficulty of this task. Along with the assignment came a new type of algorithm. This new algorithm was amazing. It held up under such pressure, and one couldn't help but wonder what kind of genius developed it. The computer researchers, watching the server group that still showed no signs of exploding or catching fire, breathed a deep sigh of relief. This algorithm was so powerful that it felt like it was beyond what humanity in this era could develop. It was too avant-garde. Some of its concepts had never even been proposed in the global network technology field before. This technology seemed to appear out of nowhere, like a rootless weed. A researcher monitoring the live broadcast situation lightly joked, murmuring to himself, could it be extraterrestrial technology? On the afternoon of the 16th, in a bustling city, Zhou Zhiyun was an employee at a technology company. It was work hours, but as an aerospace enthusiast, he couldn't focus on his job at all. The office was quiet, and everyone seemed to be working hard. He cautiously glanced at the manager's office, and, seeing no signs of the manager coming out, he let out a deep sigh of relief. He quickly took out his phone, connected his Bluetooth headset, and entered the official live stream of the space agency. Phew, just in time. It hadn't started yet. Seeing the live stream was still a black screen, he excitedly stared at the display. Even in the dark, he was thoroughly enjoying the anticipation. Why hasn't it started yet? I'm so anxious, it feels like I have bugs crawling on me. If it's not happening upstairs, I might as well take a shower. When I get back, I'll let you know the results, haha. I'm so excited. I haven't slept in 2 days. Same here, it's impossible to sleep. Haha, at the launch site in the South China Sea, thousands are staying up late together. Wow. I'm so envious of those upstairs. Shrinking his head, he watched the comments from other viewers, and he gradually became more excited. However, he dared not make a sound. The office was just too quiet. Rubbing his hands together, the screen on his phone suddenly lit up, revealing the command center. It's starting. His heart raced as he took a deep breath. The live stream showed several angles of the lunar lander. Most importantly, 3 astronauts were at the ready. The spacecraft had now reached lunar orbit. Through the portholes, they could see the moon shining with a silvery glow. Its pockmarked surface looked cold and ancient. Silently watching the lunar lander arriving from afar. The backdrop was the vast, pitch-black universe, deep and mysterious. The lunar lander had entered the landing orbit. The spacecraft was preparing to descend, expected to land in the Ural crater. The descent was underway. A loud voice resonated in the live stream. The footage followed suit, showing the spacecraft continuously descending toward the moon's surface. Without any reference points, the viewers had no idea of the distance, causing many to feel anxious, thinking something might have gone wrong. Just as many were feeling uneasy, that reassuringly loud voice echoed again. First stage of descent completed, reached landing orbit. The spacecraft is automatically searching for a landing site. The radar was scanning the lunar terrain. D01, report specific conditions. Static crackled over the radio. And then astronaut Zhai Gang's voice came through in the command hall. Wenchang, this is D01. Radar functioning normally. Suitable landing position has been found. The location has been sent, requesting approval for automatic landing procedure. D01, over. After verifying the data, the commander responded immediately according to safety protocols. Wenchang confirms, data is valid. D01, landing permitted. Wenchang, D01 understands. And this was just the beginning. Zhai Gang's optimistic and humorous voice came through the communicator, and he laughed loudly, saying, "Ha Moon. Here I come." Zhou Zhiyun, who was watching the live broadcast, couldn't help but smile at this remark. Old Zhai was truly hilarious, almost like a comedian from space. In the control hall, some observing researchers also smiled knowingly. However, in an instant, they returned to seriousness. The spacecraft was still descending, and it was getting closer to the landing point. There were only 200 meters left to the ground. The final 200 meters. Zhou Zhiyun instinctively sat up straight. His eyes fixed on the phone screen, and cold sweat began to form on his back. The last 200 meters determined success or failure. At this moment, the entire nation's attention was focused on the event. Chapter 35. Landing on the moon only 200 meters from the lunar surface. The main engine of the lunar lander was about to ignite. As the spacecraft searched for a suitable landing spot, the attitude control engines had already activated. Now it was time for the main engine to work. Whether the main engine could operate normally would be crucial for this mission. If the engine failed to ignite, the mission would be deemed a failure. Losing the main engine would mean the spacecraft could no longer take off or land on the lunar surface, which was absolutely unacceptable. In that moment, not just the audience from the country and the researchers in the command center, but even many space enthusiasts abroad were holding their breath. All the technical staff in the command center took a deep breath. The landing was completely under automated control. Besides the astronauts on the spacecraft, they could not interfere at all. So at this moment, they were also waiting like anxious examinees. Beep, beep, beep. Just then, a sudden alert sound broke the silence in the command hall. Subsequently, the animation on the large screen changed. In the animation, flames erupted from the main engine beneath the lunar lander. At the same time, a stream of data was transmitted to the command center. The operator saw the data, and with a trembling voice, barely containing excitement, announced loudly, "The main engine of the lunar lander has ignited successfully, and the altitude is decreasing. 150 meters, 100 meters, 50 meters, 10 meters. On the large screen in the command center, the animation model representing the lunar lander was extremely close to the lunar surface. Additionally, in a small window beside it, the camera positioned on the spacecraft's engine side was updating the footage in real time. Everyone could distinctly feel that the ground seemed to be rushing towards the screen. No, it was the camera approaching the ground. Until the last moment, a shadow appeared on the ground, and something like wind blew the dust away. The entire scene shook slightly, then stabilized firmly. At that moment, the operator stood up in excitement. Confirming the data from the command platform, he immediately exclaimed, "The lunar lander has successfully landed. The spacecraft has landed on the lunar surface. It's a successful landing. The spacecraft has successfully landed on the moon." The entire command hall erupted into applause. In the office of a certain metropolis, Zhou Zhiyun was overwhelmed with excitement upon hearing the two successful announcements. "We did it. The spacecraft from our nation has successfully landed on the moon. It landed successfully. Success." Zhou Zhiyun was filled with exhilaration, ready to stand up and celebrate without a care. Suddenly, a loud shout of excitement came from the manager's office. "Oh, oh, oh, oh. We did it. Ha ha ha, we did it." In Zhou Zhiyun's astonished gaze, the office door was kicked open from the inside. The usually amiable manager, with a flushed face and an excited expression, joyfully hopped out while holding a case of beer. As he ran, he shouted loudly, "Our nation has successfully landed on the moon. Success." Realizing this, Zhou Zhiyun finally reacted. Wow. It turns out his manager was secretly watching the live broadcast too. Ha ha ha. "Zhou Zhiyun, come quickly, let us drink. I know you must have been secretly watching the live stream." Did the manager not know the nature of his employees? He stood on one leg on an empty chair and exclaimed, "I know everyone was secretly watching, so the work for this morning is over. Let us get hyped." The manager, who would have thought, ha ha, Zhou Zhiyun didn't care anymore. He rushed out, shouted a few excited cheers, and ran to the manager, embracing him and waving their hands together in excitement. "Come on, Xiaozhong, bring out the big projector. We are going to broadcast the live stream of the moon landing today. Let us pay attention to the state affairs. Haha. In the future when I negotiate business with foreigners, I can hold my head high and look down on them." This was just a reflection of the excitement of the masses. Today was destined to be a day of national celebration. At that moment, the moon landing live stream room was buzzing with activity. The barrage of comments filled the entire screen, so dense that the live broadcast image was barely visible. Haha. "Successful landing, moon, here I come. Let me see. Moon, don't run away, let me see. Let us take down the flag of a certain country and crush the footprints they left behind. Haha. Someone upstairs is really addicted to cutting solar wings, right? Awesome. That's the only word to describe it. Wow, 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 wow." On the beach outside the launch site, more than 5,000 people who were stranded there were also caught up in the celebration. The entire beach was filled with excited people jumping around. On our nation's soil, even some schools paused their study sessions before lunch and directly played the live broadcast for the children. The moon landing was successful. What a great material for patriotic education. Meanwhile, in a certain location, Fred stared expressionlessly at the live broadcast on the television. On the beach, in the control room, on the streets and alleys of our nation, everyone stepped out, embracing both acquaintances and strangers, cheering with excitement. With trembling hands, they pressed the remote control in their hands. However, what made Fred furious was that even the remote seemed to be rejecting him. After pressing the button 3 times, that cursed television still wouldn't turn off. Fuck. Even you are against me on this. After cursing, he flipped the remote control over and stared. His eyes widened as he saw the large "Made in China" on the back. Fred was so furious that he trembled all over, screaming and shaking his head. FXXK FXXK FXXK. He stood up crazily, walked to the television, and raised it high with both hands. Crash. The television was smashed to the ground, shattering into pieces, with glass scattered everywhere. After wreaking havoc in the office, Fred, panting heavily, glared at a panda toy sitting on his desk with a fierce look, like a wolf ready to attack. "This is what you forced me to do. I absolutely will not allow you to surpass us. At any cost." After shouting angrily, Fred quickly walked to his desk and pressed the transparent button on it. The director of the agency, Clyde, walked slowly into the office. He glanced at the debris scattered on the floor without any surprise. Ignoring the mess underfoot, Clyde casually approached Fred and asked, "Sir, what is the matter? Get me the Defense Department and have them send someone over immediately. We must make a choice. We cannot allow them to develop like this." Chapter 36. From here, we will move to the universe. The lunar spacecraft successfully landed on the moon's surface. The 3 astronauts on board were all healthy and had no issues. The next step, once they completed their adjustments, was to exit the cabin. This would take 2 hours. Although the exit time was announced, some users in the live stream, resembling persistent individuals, decided to stay put. 2 hours? Can they really wait that long? For such a momentous day, what's the harm in waiting a couple more hours? The viewers in the live stream decided to stay right there. Meanwhile, on the moon, in the Antarctic, and in the Ural Basin, the tall lunar spacecraft stood upright on the moon's surface. The 3 astronauts were leaning against the porthole, staring blankly outside. The moon's surface was desolate and barren. It is a satellite of Earth, lacking an atmosphere, with no weather, only eternal solitude. However, it turned out that solitude was not eternal. Now, after 60 years of silence, the moon was welcoming human visitors once again. "Jai, it's so beautiful outside," Chen Dong exclaimed, gazing out the porthole, mesmerized. Indeed, the moon seen today is different from that of ancient times. When will this moon shine on the ancients? Truly spectacular and beautiful. Jai Gang was also captivated, feeling a special magic from the moon, the silent vastness leaving a profound impact on him. Ha ha ha, Jai, you're even reciting poetry. No wonder you're the first to disembark later. Niezheng joked with their captain, touching his nose and laughing, as some netizens said. What we are doing now is enough to boast about for several lifetimes. Alright, the close-up moon viewing is over, and it's time for us to get to work. Zhai Gang also smiled and waved his hand. With the moon viewing concluded, they needed to prepare for the extravehicular activity. This lunar mission was launched by a certain rocket, which can carry up to 200 tons into lunar orbit. Therefore, the spacecraft is quite large and well-equipped. It includes a lunar rover, a row of solar panels, and several scientific experiment facilities. To be honest, the lunar spacecraft could actually serve as the first module of a lunar base. However, Zhu Lao still couldn't convince the older colleagues at the space agency. The veterans insisted that safety redundancy is an absolute red line. Safety issues cannot be compromised. The lunar spacecraft was designed and manufactured in a hurry, with an intended lifespan of only 2 months. Such a spacecraft definitely cannot be used as equipment for a lunar base. The aircraft for the lunar base must have a design lifespan of at least 20 years. The 3 astronauts' first task was to deploy the lunar rover and then remotely control it to the airlock. By the time the rover reached the airlock, the 3 had already donned their spacesuits. The extravehicular suits were somewhat bulky, designed to allow astronauts to move flexibly on the lunar surface. This time, the extravehicular suits underwent significant upgrades, featuring a lightweight exoskeleton that could operate for 2 hours, matching the oxygen supply duration inside the suits. While working, it could even assist astronauts in lifting the lunar rover with both hands. Once the 3 were dressed in their extravehicular suits, they made their way to the airlock. The extravehicular activity was about to begin. At the same time, back on Earth, the space agency's live broadcast room opened on time. As soon as the screen appeared, it instantly captured everyone's attention. The 3 astronauts, fully equipped, were standing inside the airlock, patiently waiting. What excited everyone even more was that the live broadcast offered selectable views. Another perspective showed the camera focused on the lunar spacecraft's airlock from the outside. Hey, how did this shot come about? Did the astronauts go out early? Is this staged? Some wondered. They must ensure safety, right? Can the people upstairs stop guessing? Can't you see the small text below says lunar rover perspective? How did the rover get there? It can't have driven itself, right? Are you still arguing with me? Are you a village internet user, or what? Can't a remote-controlled car do the job? Seriously, what era is this? It's definitely a large remote-controlled lunar rover. The person asking the questions looked a bit dumbfounded. Wait, what if they really are elementary school students? Forget it, just treat them as the enemy and bury them. Haha, this perspective is great. The space agency really knows how to promote. The extra footage was deliberately added. This is simply the lunar rover having fun, repurposed as a live broadcast vehicle. The scene was perfectly aligned with the hatch of the lunar module. Inside the livestream room, viewers were excitedly declaring that the space agency's camera setup had captured a great moment. It's time to exit the module. The barrage of comments instantly disappeared. At the Space Command Center, the commander spoke. Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, the airlock has been vented. You are cleared to exit. Proceed as planned. Roger that. Unit 1 is opening the hatch. Came the response. Receiving the command, the commander of Unit 1 quickly grabbed a rotating lever fixed nearby and secured it to the hatch. With a firm effort, he turned it a few times, and the safety lock of the hatch was released. He set the rotating lever aside. As he placed his hand on the hatch lock, he took a deep breath, applied pressure, and then gently pushed. The hatch opened. Stepping out with his right foot, he exited the module and arrived at the landing platform. The lunar module's hatch was designed with 2 sets of devices. One was a landing elevator, and the other was a staircase for safety backup. Typically, the elevator was used. Standing on the elevator, behind him, Chen Dong and Nie Zheng quickly followed. Zhai Gang stood on a platform 3 meters above the ground, taking a moment to look around in awe. The vast, desolate land stretched endlessly, silent and dark. With the blue earth visible in the sky, standing on the moon truly felt like looking down at the bright moon and thinking of home. After a moment of reflection, he smiled slightly and immediately reported, Dawn, this is Unit 1, this is Unit 1. After speaking, he waved towards the distant lunar rover and called out loudly, I have exited the module and feel great. Behind him, both Chen Dong and Nie Zheng smiled as well, waving while reporting, this is Unit 2. I have also exited the module and feel great. This is Unit 3. I'm exiting now, feeling fantastic. The 3 spoke with excitement and raised voices. Upon hearing their reports, the commander and the technical staff in the command hall exchanged knowing smiles. Especially the commander, who immediately leaned closer to the microphone and responded, Dawn acknowledges. At that moment, the entire livestream room erupted in light laughter. The phrase I have exited the module and feel great was clearly understood by everyone. They had exited, and all 3 had come out together. The elevator began to descend. Logically, the first step on the moon should involve saying something special, right? What should we say? I don't know, just watch. Haha, look at the spacesuits. They actually have exoskeletons. Impressive. Wow, is this a new spacesuit? Aside from a faint smile at that phrase, almost everyone was glued to the screen. They were eager to hear what the astronauts from Huaguo would say upon their first steps on the moon. Subconsciously, everyone hoped to overshadow that famous phrase from a certain country. With a thud, the sound of the elevator reaching the ground transmitted through the spacesuit to Zhai Gang's ears. Perhaps due to the solid and human transmission of sound, the impact was quite dull. We have arrived, he thought as he exhaled deeply, stepping confidently onto the lunar surface. A clear shoe print appeared on the lunar surface. As he firmly stepped onto the moon, Zhai Gang maintained this posture and solemnly addressed the rover in the distance. I convey the wishes of all aviation personnel to everyone on Earth. Comrades, We will embark from here to the universe. After speaking, Zhai Gang took another step, successfully placing his foot on the moon. From today, our nation is the second country in the world to land on the moon. We will venture from here into the cosmos to conquer the vast sea of stars. Chapter 37. Electromagnetic Pulse. Su Tian is a researcher at the National Electromagnetic Field Efficiency Research Institute. Yesterday, due to the successful manned lunar landing, the institute had an unusual holiday, allowing him to take a break at a nearby scenic area. As a result, this morning, when he left home and took public transport, he experienced what it meant to celebrate as a nation. On the slowly approaching bus, he noticed that it had been repainted in just one day. This time, it featured an oil painting. The background of the painting depicted a vast starry sky, with 3 astronauts in spacesuits standing on a pale land. They stood side by side, gazing up at the stars, with serious expressions and deep gazes. Additionally, large characters were printed under the bus window. Comrades, we will embark from here to the universe. Su Tian was all too familiar with this image. Wasn't this the very scene of the 3 astronauts from yesterday's lunar landing? Wow, this bus is so trendy, it must have been painted overnight. On the bus, people were discussing this as well. As the bus passed a large shopping mall, the big screen there also played an edited, uplifting version of that phrase. Su Tian felt an inexplicable sensation. He sensed that the people outside, in their celebration, had gained something intangible yet profound. The atmosphere outside gave him a sense of increased confidence, a spirit he had always felt was lacking. This feeling was something he had only seen in videos. Back in the last century, the older generation of scientists, deeply immersed in their research, embodied a fearless spirit, believing only in themselves. This was confidence. Unexpectedly, this spirit seemed to have spread to everyone today. Indeed, we have landed on the moon. We are the most advanced nation on this planet. If we lack confidence, then who else has the right to feel confident? After thinking for a while on the bus, Su Tian understood this and smiled slightly. With a new realization and an unprecedented good mood, he arrived at the research institute. However, as soon as he entered the elevator, he sensed something was off. When the elevator reached the 2nd floor, a female colleague, who usually shared the same elevator with him, suddenly rushed out in a hurry. Her face was filled with urgency, and her steps were quick. Just as he reached out to greet her, she didn't even glance his way, leaving Su Tian feeling a bit awkward as he lowered his hand. At the same time, he wondered what was going on. There seems to be something important going on. With doubts in his mind, Su Tian walked into his floor, changed into his work uniform, and headed towards the research room. Just as he reached the door, the director called out to him. Su, come here quickly, there's something urgent. Come to the conference room first. After saying this, the director quickly walked away. Something urgent? Su Tian was even more puzzled and immediately walked towards the conference room. Upon entering the conference room, he was surprised to see that everyone from the research institute was present. All right, everyone take your seats. The director has gone to meet the representatives from the military. The deputy director hurriedly arranged for everyone to sit down. Once everyone was seated, full of curiosity, the director arrived with a man in military uniform. The two sat at the main table. All right, everyone is here. Let me introduce this person. This is Academician Ma Weixing, a professor from the Military Academy of Sciences, specializing in electromagnetics and applications. Hello everyone. Academician Ma Weixing, known by this name, did not carry an air of superiority. He smiled amiably and gestured for quiet amid the welcoming applause. As you all know, I am from the Military Academy of Sciences, so I inevitably have some military style. Without further ado, let us get straight to the point. The purpose of gathering all members of the Electromagnetic Effect Research Institute today is singular. Ma Weixing slowly stood up. The projector in the back immediately responded, displaying the interface as the cursor blinked. Seeing that the audience was ready, Ma Weixing scanned the room and said loudly, "The purpose is to research battery pulse weapons." In the astonished gaze of Su Tian in the back row, several large Chinese characters appeared on the big screen. Electromagnetic Pulse Weapon, EMP. Below, it was an introduction, practical research model verification of electromagnetic pulse weapons. At the Xishan base. In the underground section, Fang Jing was undergoing load training. Indeed, he was already able to endure training at a 6G overload, and it could gradually increase to 7G. Yang Wei patted Fang Jing's shoulder with satisfaction and stopped his stopwatch. Uncle Yang, this load training is really not something a person can handle. After getting off the machine, Fang Jing felt a bit dizzy. This was due to insufficient blood supply to his brain. The more painful the experience, the more he admired the uncle beside him. Looking at the man who appeared ordinary yet was a face every citizen had seen, Fang Jing admired. I really don't know how Uncle Yang managed to endure it back then. Hee, little guy, the secret to success lies in having a firm belief, Yang Wei. Dressed in a deep blue space training suit, smiled slightly in response to Fang Jing's question. You still need to work hard. 6G is a bit challenging. And the road ahead is long. The person in front of him called him a little guy, and Fang Jing didn't feel it was wrong at all. In fact, he thought it was quite reasonable and hoped he would continue to be called that. The reason being, Uncle Yang was the first person from the country to go into space, a true space hero. He once flew on the Shenzhou V spacecraft, becoming the first person from his country to enter space. I know, Uncle Yang, I will work hard. Fang Jing confidently waved his hand, displaying a childlike demeanor in front of the person who inexplicably brought him comfort. Well, he just needed to keep pushing forward. Uncle Yang encouraged Fang Jing with a few words, his gaze shifting to the television in the lounge. Watching colleagues digging on the moon broadcasted on the internal network. A smile appeared on his face. Uncle Yang seemed to feel a sense of pride. Once upon a time, the country's space program was weak and couldn't even compare to others. But now, they had actually succeeded in landing on the moon. However, Fang Jing could still sense a hint of melancholy in Uncle Yang's eyes. Perhaps it was because he had been injured during the first manned space mission due to the unrefined procedures. Maybe it was to protect this space hero. Since that first manned mission, Uncle Yang had never returned to space. Fang Jing vaguely remembered the heart-stopping moments during the Shenzhou 5 mission, where a 26-second resonance nearly cost him his life. He had persevered through numerous difficulties, but it had resulted in some internal damage. Since then, Uncle Yang had remained on the ground, watching his colleagues soar through the universe. Uncle Yang, there will be another chance. Once the space elevator is completed, you can go to space whenever you want. Fang Jing felt a surge of excitement in his heart. He couldn't stand to see such a heroic figure look so forlorn. Such heroes, who dedicated themselves to their country and people, should have no worries from now on. Chapter 38. How did you guess that? Indeed, Fang Jing's space training was personally conducted by Uncle Yang. When Fang Jing first saw Uncle Yang, he doubted whether he was dreaming. Even Zhou Yuan, Wu Shi, and others were astonished. To see this space hero in person made Zhou Yuan, a big guy, turn into a fan right on the spot, joyfully calling him Brother Yang. However, Uncle Yang had not joined the 237 project, so he was unaware of Fang Jing's secret. All he knew was that Fang Jing seemed to be related to a military project and might serve as a payload expert on a spaceship to the future moon base. But since it involved going to the sky, he was determined to train him well. Therefore, he had very high expectations for Fang Jing. Meanwhile, Uncle Yang temporarily left due to the unfinished manned moon landing project. Just as he left, Zhao Guangyao excitedly approached Fang Jing. Good news, Xiao Fang. The electromagnetic pulse weapon development has made new progress. Zhao Guangyao opened with a major announcement. The electromagnetic pulse weapon, commonly known as EMP, is a weapon that uses electromagnetic pulses to disrupt enemy electronic information technology equipment. It has another famous nickname, the second atomic bomb. However, unlike in games, there are currently no large-scale non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapons in actual use. In fact, to date, nuclear weapons remain the strongest electromagnetic pulse weapons. It is said that in 1961, a hydrogen bomb was detonated over the New Siberian Islands, producing electromagnetic pulses that reached thousands of kilometers. Since then, various countries have been actively researching this type of weapon. Fortunately, Fang Jing found relevant technology for non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapons in the Class B technology repository opened by the Wandering Earth. This electromagnetic pulse weapon is based on the kinetic batteries referred to by the military as the exoskeleton battery of the complete entity, the Proud Shark. Although the range of this pulse weapon is much smaller than that of atomic energy weapons, it is already at a fully usable level. In this universe, it is truly a divine instrument. Is there any progress? Hearing Zhao Ji's excited tone, Fang Jing also felt happy. How's it going? Has it been produced? The Military Academy and the Electromagnetic Field Efficacy Research Institute have collaborated to create a prototype, which has been installed on the Dongfeng 17, and they are now preparing for experiments. Preliminary estimates suggest that the range of the battery pulse covers about 300 kilometers. Zhao Guangyao couldn't hide his excitement. This is EMP. In modern information warfare, whoever masters EMP technology first will be in an absolutely leading position. In modern warfare, what doesn't rely on electronic components? With one EMP, all your drones, communications, and electronic devices will be rendered useless. This can definitely serve as a trump card. At a critical moment, it can be launched. Even a carrier fleet could be directly neutralized. This would elevate our combat capability to a whole new level. Since acquiring this technology, the military has placed great emphasis on it and has made it a primary target for breakthrough. 300 kilometers. Fang Jing gasped in astonishment. One missile could render all electronic components within 300 kilometers completely inoperable. This weapon is truly lethal. That's right, this weapon is even more terrifying than nuclear weapons. Zhao Guangyao wasn't exaggerating. Using nuclear weapons against other major powers is a serious matter. At that point, the enemy has no choice but to retaliate, leading to mutual destruction. However, the EMP weapon is different. If used well, this is countless times more frightening than nuclear weapons. It can instantly turn the tide of battle. As Zhao Guangyao's eyes sparkled with excitement, he suddenly seemed to remember something, furrowing his brow with some concern. However, when we presented the technology to Academician Ma Weixing, he seemed to have noticed something. He recalled that when they brought the technology to the military academy, Academician Ma Weixing, after reviewing the entire technical summary, jokingly remarked something that seemed out of context. What happened? Did he discover an issue? Fang Jing was puzzled, wondering what could be problematic since Class B technology isn't much more advanced than that of this universe. At that time, when Chun Limin and I presented the technology to Academician Ma, after looking at it, he seemed to smile and said, "This technology doesn't seem like something from this era." Zhao Guangyao recalled the scene, his expression filled with doubt, almost certain that the Academician had noticed something. Did he say anything else? Fang Jing asked curiously. He also said that the people from the confidentiality department could relax a bit. This technology, without the core data, even if given to a certain country, the other side wouldn't be able to learn it. Zhao Guangyao wasn't a technical expert either and scratched his head. He truly didn't understand what he meant. Fang Jing also had a big question mark in his mind. He didn't understand. While the two were communicating underground at the Shishan base, Ma Weiqing had obtained the data from the Electromagnetic Field Efficiency Research Institute and left. He didn't return to the Military Academy of Sciences, but went directly to the capital. In the capital, at Zijing Pavilion, he found Old Zhu. Oh, academician Ma. What brings you to the capital? Old Zhu sat comfortably in a wooden chair, casually picked up a cup, poured a drink for Ma, and took a sip himself. Old Zhu, I specifically came here to find you. Glancing around, Ma Weiqing chuckled softly and whispered, after all, this is a place for the top leaders, absolutely confidential. As the fragrant tea entered his mouth, Old Zhu raised an eyebrow and curiously stared at Ma Weiqing. Absolutely confidential? Did this kid have something important to tell him? Could it be that the academy had some significant technological breakthrough? Thinking this, Old Zhu couldn't help but feel a bit excited and took another sip of the aromatic tea. Old Zhu, has our country unearthed any alien relics? Ma Weiqing spoke frankly and boldly, and his words were shocking. Uffed. Zhu Jincheng was so surprised that he spat out the tea in his mouth. Ma Weiqing quickly handed him a tissue. Old Zhu hurriedly wiped his mouth, and once he composed himself, he widened his eyes in disbelief and asked, What are you talking about? Alien relics? How could such a thing exist? Where did you hear that? Old Zhu looked at Ma Weiqing somewhat nervously. This kid must have seen something. But how did he figure it out? The confidentiality level of Project 237 was unprecedented. Chapter 39. Ahem, that's right, it is alien relics. Hee. Looking at the flustered Old Zhu, Ma Weiqing became even more certain of his speculation. He straightened up, looking directly at Old Zhu, and said confidently, Old Zhu, don't try to deceive me. Other technologies, like the exoskeleton, you can claim were secretly developed for the military, that's understandable. But this electromagnetic pulse weapon, I've studied it for many years, I'm an expert in this field. Do you think I can't understand the intricacies of it? With a sneer, Ma Weiqing was quite confident. As an expert in electromagnetism, he had a broad scope of knowledge, and in certain areas, he was among the best in the world. Among his most famous developments were the second-generation DC integrated power system and the electromagnetic catapult. Because his research was so advanced, the aircraft carrier that his country had previously planned to build, which was originally designed to use steam catapults, ended up being changed midway to electromagnetic catapults because they were simply too appealing in comparison. In the field of electromagnetics, he has such confidence. Mr. Zhu understood. This young man had discerned something from the technical documents. Ma Weiqing, who was aware of the latest developments in the world of electromagnetic pulses, immediately recognized that this technology was not something that should exist on Earth at this stage. Being half a step ahead is genius. Being a step ahead is madness. But being 1.5 steps ahead can only mean extraterrestrial origins. Mr. Zhu had long anticipated this day, but he didn't expect it to come so soon. He chuckled helplessly, realizing that someone had seen through the clues. He had no choice but to go along with it. His expression turned serious, his back straightened, and his eyes instantly became sharp and cold. With his hands clasped in front of him, he spoke in a hoarse yet solemn voice. That's right, Comrade Ma Weiqing. It is indeed an extraterrestrial relic. Ma Weiqing raised his eyebrows, his pupils suddenly contracting as he stood up in astonishment. He stared incredulously at Mr. Zhu, his face filled with disbelief. Could it really be true? There are indeed extraterrestrial relics. Where are they? Ma Weiqing's tone was urgent, his voice filled with excitement, and a look of yearning appeared on his face. After all, it was an extraterrestrial relic. This couldn't be disclosed. The clever Zhu Jincheng observed Ma Weiqing's reaction, maintaining a neutral expression but secretly feeling pleased. You little rascal, even if you guessed something, you are still being played around by this old guy. Just wait for me to lead you into the trap. Moreover, this is classified information. Seeing Mr. Zhu remain tight-lipped on the matter, Ma Weiqing expressed understanding. Such secrets are likely known only to a few individuals in the country, and it was already impressive that someone could provide him with an answer. No wonder the military has made generational breakthroughs in so many areas recently. They have even developed electromagnetic cannons. Ma Weiqing understood everything now. His doubts were all resolved. So that is how it is. The country has found extraterrestrial relics at a certain location and has begun secretly conducting reverse engineering. At this thought, Ma Weiqing suddenly felt that the Zijing Pavilion was no longer secure enough. He cautiously looked around and quietly asked Mr. Zhu. Mr. Zhu, can you give me some insight? To what extent have we progressed in our reverse engineering? We are currently at a bottleneck. The reason we are in such a hurry to go to the moon this time is to retrieve something. That item can help us accelerate our progress. Mr. Zhu also lowered his voice, gesturing vaguely towards the newspaper on the table that reported the successful manned moon landing, with an inscrutable expression. 70% false, 30% true. This will certainly keep people spinning in circles. This was a premeditated statement from Zhu Jincheng, intended to deflect those scientists who had begun to piece together some clues. After all, the scientific technologies extracted from the world of Wandering Earth were becoming increasingly advanced. Implementing these technologies in this universe required the assistance of these scientists. Therefore, explaining where these technologies came from became a crucial part of the process. Ma Weiqing inhaled sharply. It was as if a fog had been lifted, revealing the truth. All the doubts that had been in his heart were suddenly clarified. The Academy's efforts to support Old Zhu wholeheartedly and risk everything have raised quite a few questions. In the field of aerospace, there isn't such an urgent demand from our country. Previously, He thought that perhaps the higher-ups had truly come to a realization and wanted to engage in a serious space competition. After hearing old Zhu's further explanation, he was truly astonished. So that's how it is. There is actually something on the moon that could help us accelerate our reverse engineering progress. Are the alien relics spacecraft? At this point, Ma Weixing couldn't help but ask. Old Zhu simply looked at him with his weathered eyes. Oh, it's a secret, a secret. Ma Weixing understood old Zhu's meaning and quickly stopped asking further questions. Just knowing is enough. Old Zhu had an expression that conveyed, those who understand, understand. Those who don't. It's fine, and it's not convenient to say more. In fact, he just hadn't finished organizing his thoughts. However, even just this information was enough to leave Ma Weixing in shock. I understand, old Zhu. He nodded vigorously, and all doubt vanished from academician Ma's mind. But after careful consideration, he still asked the most pressing question. Old Zhu, could you share a bit about the upper limits of our reverse engineering technology? Alien relics. What Ma Weixing was most concerned about was what level our country could reach with this opportunity and how far technology could develop. What is the upper limit? Little Ma, I can only tell you that it's enough for us to leave the Earth. Old Zhu hinted to Ma Weixing with a rather serious expression. Leave the Earth. Ma Weixing was shaken and gasped in disbelief. He was practically in shock. It's no wonder. This revelation was simply too astonishing. Leave the Earth. He recalled Zhai Gang's words after the successful manned moon landing. We will step into the universe from here. It turned out this was no joke. This is really happening. Little Ma, being able to deduce the source of our technology suggests that these technologies are more advanced than we imagined. Zhu Jinqing noticed the astonished expression on Ma Weixing's face and nodded slightly. This was the effect he wanted. So, how did you figure it out? Old Zhu. The electromagnetic pulse weapon design you assigned to me doesn't seem to exceed current technology by much. Recovering from his shock and speaking about his area of expertise, Ma Weixing felt confident and looked at old Zhu with a wry smile. However, the issues here are significant. Especially the core data. None of the existing theories support it. I pondered over it. This thing is likely a technology directly derived from simulating electromagnetic pulses through fusion reactors. Ma Weixing looked at old Zhu, smiling gently. Didn't he expect it, did you? You revealed your hand here. The technology for the electromagnetic pulse weapon clearly has a higher-level foundation technology that was used to reverse engineer it. There's definitely something fishy about that. Following this thread, he linked it to the alien relics. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain. Could it be time travel or parallel universes? Compared to these two, he would rather believe in extraterrestrial relics. At least that seems more reasonable. Chapter 40 Hee. Sharing joy is unnecessary, but sharing hardship is fine. So it turns out it was like this. Old Zhu nodded thoughtfully at the words. This was indeed their oversight. They hadn't expected such a significant loophole. However, there is a silver lining, old Zhu. Ma Weixing's doubts were answered, and his mood brightened. He poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip, and smiled slightly. At least, non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapons are something the enemy cannot replicate at all. This is our exclusive trump card. Non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapons require fusion devices for long-term stable electromagnetic release experiments in order to derive suitable data models. With this model, they could manufacture weapons according to the structure. But without this data model, it's just wishful thinking. Developing this weapon is less effective than tackling controllable nuclear fusion. Who knows, the progress on controllable nuclear fusion might be even faster. That's great. What is that saying? Trump card? Upon hearing this, old Zhu threw his head back and laughed heartily. A trump card is great. I have it, and you don't. Just wait to be beaten. Alright. I've cleared my doubts. Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any further. After finishing his inquiries, Ma Weixing decided not to linger, as he was also very busy and prepared to leave immediately. Good. Remember, that model must be kept absolutely confidential. Zhu Jinqing nodded, waved his hand, and called out. He absolutely trusted Ma Weixing. He himself had participated multiple times in highly confidential domestic research projects, making him a trustworthy person. Got it. As he stood up and walked to the door, as if recalling something, Ma Weixing leaned halfway out, turned back to Zhu Jinqing, smiled slightly, and said, whenever you feel we are ready to join this project, call me immediately. To be honest, I'm already itching to get started. Old Zhu, you've really put me in a tough spot. I'll be sleepless again tonight. With that, before Zhu Jinqing could respond, Ma Weixing quickly stepped out and closed the door. Hey, you little rascal, blame your wife for your insomnia, not me. Zhu Old chuckled, feeling amused. This kid is quite clever. Whenever Xiao Fong can open the passage to that place, let us bring him into Project 237. It's just right since he studied electromagnetic mechanics. He will have great prospects in space. Xishan Base. After Zhao Guangyao left for a while, he returned with a bemused expression on his face. What's wrong, brother Zhao? Seeing his strange expression, Fong Jing raised an eyebrow. He quickly set down the pen in his hand, pulling himself away from the sea of physics problems. This physics knowledge is also part of the aerospace training. Cough. What a coincidence. Coughing lightly, Zhao Guangyao shook his head with a wry smile and said, just this morning, I mentioned that academician Ma Weixing seemed to suspect something was off with the way I and old Chun were looking at each other. And indeed, there is such a matter. Fong Jing clearly remembered that Zhao Guangyao had just talked about this. As a result, by noon, academician Ma went to find old Zhu. Zhao Guangyao helplessly pursed his lips and said, these old scholars are just too perceptive. Academician Ma deduced something from that technical document. firmly insisting that our country has discovered some alien relics. What did old Zhu say? Fang Jing felt a jolt in his heart. As expected of a serious expert, their level of insight is truly different. Old Zhu went along with it, also insisting that alien relics had been discovered. Zhao Guangyao chuckled aloud. Well, now we're on the hunt for aliens. Ha ha ha, alien relics? Ha ha. Fang Jing laughed heartily, finding it genuinely amusing. Just imagine. An old academic seriously fooling a peak middle-aged academic. It was like an old trickster teasing his apprentice. The scene was indeed entertaining. One dared to guess, and the other dared to respond. Zhao Guangyao also chuckled a few times. However, he was quite impressed by these scholars' ability to accept such ideas. When he initially received this task from Fang Jing, he even wondered if the higher-ups were just playing a prank on him. In contrast, academician Ma immediately guessed the alien relics based on the technology. That kind of thinking was remarkably active. But now, being involved in the 237 project, looking back, it was indeed somewhat amusing. Ha ha ha. After discussing this matter, what are you studying? After mentioning Ma Weixing, Zhao Guangyao looked curiously at the practice book on Fang Jing's desk. It's astronaut training. I never imagined astronaut training would include these things. Upon hearing this, Fang Jing's face turned pale, and his brain buzzed. This was the fear of being overwhelmed by physics problems. Is it just this? Unexpectedly, what Fang Jing found troublesome made Zhao Guangyao chuckle after glancing at it a few times. What do you mean, just this? Fang Jing looked at Zhao Guangyao with a face full of questions. You know all this. Don't doubt it. I used to be in a flight team. These are all basics. Just study hard. Seeing Fang Jing's disbelief, Zhao Guangyao held his head high. I'm just joking. I used to be a top pilot, you know. Alright, you all really have your own skills. Fang Jing understood now that everyone involved in this 237 project indeed possessed exceptional abilities and spoke well too. This place feels quite nice. By the way, Brother Zhao, where has Brother Zhou gone? I haven't seen him around lately. Not wanting to dwell on sad topics, Fang Jing quickly changed the subject. Zhou Yuan. Ha ha ha. He has also been taken by General Yang for training. A mischievous smile appeared on Zhao Guangyao's face. Aha. Brother Zhou was also taken by Uncle Yang for training. Why? Hearing Zhao Guangyao say this, Fang Jing's mood immediately brightened. Indeed, when a person is in pain, it is truly difficult, and someone needs to share the burden to achieve a sense of balance. Brother Zhou Yuan is really unfortunate. Ha! If we were to go to the moon, it would be good to have Zhou Yuan accompany us for some support. Zhao Guangyao explained with a smile that resembled Fang Jing's. That rascal, on ordinary days, can nearly turn the base upside down even while wearing an exoskeleton. Now finally, someone can keep him in check. Xiao Fang, you have no idea. In front of General Yang, Zhou Yuan, that reckless fellow, behaves like a well-behaved grandson. Zhao Guangyao narrated vividly. Fang Jing imagined Zhou Gu's obedient appearance and couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. So Uncle Yang is actually Zhou Yuan's nemesis. Fang Jing and Zhao Guangyao exchanged glances, immediately linking arms and discussing how best to tease Zhou Yuan when he returns. They must make sure to laugh at him heartily. Chapter 41. What happened to the promised 900 kilometers? In the northwest desert of a certain country, in an uninhabited area, Ma Weixing and Old Zhu met again. Today is the day for the military to test the electromagnetic pulse bomb. Due to the weapon's nickname as the second atomic bomb and its catastrophic potential in modern information warfare, many high-ranking officials from the 4 major military branches gathered here to witness the new weapon's specific combat potential. Zhu Jinsheng was the last to arrive. When he showed up, all the bigwigs stood up in unison to welcome him. Old Zhu, this time the military academy has prepared a big treasure for us. An old army officer surnamed Su from the army had been eagerly anticipating something impressive from the military academy since the exoskeleton incident. After pursuing for so long, it seemed Old Zhu had been avoiding him, and he hadn't seen him until now. Finally, he had caught him. He had heard that it was something capable of turning the tide. The Air Force bigwig, looking curious, greeted Old Zhu. Of course, after holding back for so long. We're in for a big surprise. Zhu Jinsheng confidently assured while stepping aside to let Ma Weixing take the stage. He pointed and said with a smile, "This is today's main character. We are all supporting roles. Now, let us introduce today's weapon experiment." Everyone was already familiar with Ma Weixing. After greeting him, they quieted down to listen to his introduction. Everyone, the electromagnetic pulse bomb developed by the military academy, is temporarily named Kinetic. Ma Weixing, already well-versed in the weapon's performance, confidently explained, this kinetic EMP can trigger an electromagnetic pulse within a range of 300 kilometers, damaging the electronic components of enemy weapons, rendering their equipment incapacitated or destroyed. Furthermore, if released over an urban area, Ma Weixing paused, suddenly smirking, and in a serious tone added, taking the city of Magic as an example, which spans about 100 miles north to south. If a kinetic bomb were released over Magic, the magical city will directly revert to the period before World War II overnight. And all technologies based on electronic components will be violently destroyed by battery pulses. This is a nuclear weapon aimed at modern information societies. In fact, what Ma Weixing said was somewhat conservative. A strong electromagnetic pulse can even affect radio waves. If a kinetic weapon is detonated above the magical city, at least in terms of information transmission, it will revert directly to the feudal era, and even radio stations could be rendered useless. The key is that there will be no harm to people during this process. It's quite fascinating. An army officer named Su had a gleam in his eyes. This is a weapon that could overturn the existing combat system. It's terrifying. The Air Force chief widened his eyes, feeling relieved that this weapon first appeared in their country. Everyone knows that modern supersonic fighter jets rely on flight control operated by pilots. This weapon would directly incapacitate the radar, flight control, and electronic components on missiles, leaving the pilots bewildered. How can they fly the plane? We need to immediately understand the extent of this weapon's damage to military electronic components and then research appropriate defensive measures. The Navy chief looked at Ma Weiqing and immediately expressed his demands. Even before the experiments began, all the military leaders felt a sense of unease. In any case, all future weapons will need to incorporate the capability to counter electromagnetic pulse weapons. Everyone, let us begin the experiments. What Ma Weiqing wanted was for everyone to take this seriously. He smiled slightly and immediately organized the tests. The kinetic weapon experiment began. The process of the experiment was quite simple. A circle with a diameter of 300 kilometers was delineated in the desert, along the epicenter. Military equipment was placed every 100 kilometers to test the kinetic weapon's destructive capability on electronic components. The Air Force chief directly brought over a J-20 fighter jet. Even more outrageous, he was not satisfied and also brought a satellite that was about to be launched by the aerospace sector, placing it exactly 300 kilometers away. Of course, the electromagnetic pulse bomb, after specific frequency adjustments, has a designated direction, so it would not interfere with civilian equipment and satellites outside the experiment. Aerospace-grade chips have the strongest radiation and electromagnetic interference protection in the world. The Air Force chief confidently stood up and said, I have placed it at a distance of 300 kilometers. If your kinetic projectile can damage this chip, it means that no one on Earth can defend against the electromagnetic pulse of kinetic energy. The Air Force chief spoke with confidence. He did not believe that at such an extreme distance, kinetic energy could destroy aerospace-grade chips with just one electromagnetic pulse. If this were true, this weapon would be too incredible. To such an extent, he could not believe it. He thought, at the very least, the nearby aerospace-grade chips should survive, right? Damn. The Air Force is still very generous. The Army officer Su smacked his lips. The Army can only deploy a few tanks, radar vehicles, anti-aircraft guns, and howitzer vehicles to test the waters. The Navy has transferred radar and fire control systems from various vessels. It can be said that the most advanced military technology and equipment from the region have converged here. They are about to face the impact of a kinetic energy battery pulse projectile. The kinetic warhead has been placed into the Dongfeng 17 hypersonic missile. This missile is the strongest penetrator. In the world of martial arts, speed is invincible. The Dongfeng 17 represents the pinnacle of speed, relying on its wave-riding body design. Its flight speed exceeds 10 Mach. Current anti-missile interception systems are utterly ineffective against it. The kinetic Dongfeng 17 can only be described with one term: unmatched. The area around the impact point has been cleared, ensuring there are no oversights, and the missile can be launched. In the distance, the missile has been erected from the vehicle. All the military leaders present stood up, their eyes fixed on the images observed through optical telescopes. Launch permission granted. The spokesperson for the rocket forces immediately issued the order. With a whoosh, the roar of the engine sounded. The Dongfeng 17 traced a flight path in the sky. After reaching a certain altitude, it executed a violent right-angle turn, as fast as lightning. A shadow flashed in the optical radar, and then, several thousand meters above the epicenter, the kinetic projectile exploded violently. This explosion did not produce overwhelming flames or lingering smoke. In a realm imperceptible to human senses, an electromagnetic pulse erupted wildly. Flashes of electricity surged, devastating everything in its path. High-frequency pulses destroyed all electronic components within a radius of 300 miles. The Air Force leaders noticed the monitoring computer, their mouths agape, eyes filled with shock. The computer screen flickered continuously, and moments later, it turned pitch black. It was not until several minutes later that the computer returned to normal, despite being nearly 900 kilometers from the epicenter. Is this what you meant by a coverage range of only 300 kilometers? This is 3 times that distance. Your stated impact range is incredibly conservative. ISNT it. Chapter 42. Silenced by a single shot in the desert. All the leaders present were left speechless by this powerful kinetic impact. The power is simply overwhelming. ISNT it. Drones used by the Army for monitoring were falling like raindrops without any cost. The Air Force leader took a deep breath and hurried to the now restored computer to observe closely. As a result, just one glance left him breathless, filled with shock. It turned out that the aerospace-grade chip he had high hopes for had failed to withstand even a single pulse and was destroyed immediately. Quick! Send someone to gather data on the damaged equipment. The Air Force leader exhaled deeply, turning to look at Ma Weiqing with a fiery gaze. There is no doubt that this is a weapon capable of overturning the existing rules of warfare. However, an Army officer was quicker to react. He rushed forward, visibly angry and impatient, questioning loudly, "What the heck? Didn't you say the kill range was only 300 kilometers? My drones deployed at 600 kilometers were taken down. What a huge loss. Those drones are expensive, you know." "Step aside. I thought you had something important to say," another officer interjected, pushing him aside. "It's quite ridiculous to be so dramatic. With kinetic projectiles, what use are your drones? They should have been retired long ago. It's better to leave them behind for now and switch to new technology once the anti-electromagnetic pulse tech is ready." As the saying goes, a crying child gets attention. Securing funding is quite a technical challenge. Every year, besides regular funding, why does the Air Force receive so much more than the Army? I can take out the J-5 for a spin every year, and the money just flows in. So, clearly, this officer is not getting it. The old officer was momentarily taken aback by this. The recent drones were considered special losses, so he shouldn't feel too bad. The Air Force officer, seeing the opportunity, turned to another colleague with hope in his eyes, asking, "Has this kinetic projectile been finalized?" It has been finalized. Moreover, the frequency, intensity, and range of the electromagnetic pulse can all be adjusted. The colleague confirmed, explaining, once the Military Science Academy presented the technical model, it was clear that this weapon could change the rules of modern warfare. As long as we firmly grasp this weapon, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say we could lead globally. That's good to hear. This must be equipped to our Air Force at the earliest. The Air Force officer exclaimed excitedly. Hey, did you forget about our Navy? Old Wu, are you itching for a fight? The Navy officer interjected, unable to hold back. What do you mean it has to be equipped to the Air Force first? Have you even consulted us? All right. You're not a kid anymore, but still with that temper, another officer said as the two were about to engage in a heated debate. At that moment, a third officer, holding his forehead, had to step in. He glared at both of them, surveyed the room, and made a decision. The kinetic projectiles are rarely used, so let's allocate a small number to each branch for now. A few of these will suffice. You're not trying to send the other side back to the Stone Age. The final distribution plan was set. Meanwhile, researchers who had gone to verify the experimental data returned. The data was compiled, and everyone gathered around to review it. Wow. Old Wu, your aerospace-grade chip melted right through. One officer laughed. What's so funny? Your radar vehicle isn't any better. It was completely destroyed, came the reply. And you, didn't your shipborne radar also get taken out? Don't call me big brother, he exclaimed. Damn it. With a 128 nanometer process, these chips can resist radiation and interference. And they can be rendered useless just like that. This is something incredible. A group of high-ranking officials gasped as they looked at the statistics on equipment damage. The air in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Everyone imagined a scenario. If they were struck by a kinetic projectile without knowing the enemy possessed such a weapon, it would be a disaster. All sorts of radars, communication devices, data links, and command systems would be rendered inoperative, plunging them back into a pre-World War II state, without even the use of telegraphs. Especially since such weapons were in the hands of one of the only two highly informationized and modernized militaries in the world. In this case, one could say the enemy might as well not fight at all. Suddenly, a representative from a certain nation slammed a model of a missile system on the table and shouted to the other countries, "I have a winning hand. You are all free to play." He continued, "It's not that I look down on anyone, but I just want to say, all of you present here are beneath me. From now on, can we truly say we are invincible? How can we fight? If someone dares to engage with a certain Eastern power, the first move would be an electromagnetic pulse that sends you back to a pre-World War II state, crippling your radars and communications. Then, they would engage in informationized warfare. Similar to how it was done in the Gulf War, keeping you pinned down without a chance to fight back. What was World War II? It was mechanized warfare. Modern informationized warfare against mechanization? That would be like beating someone while they are tied up." As these thoughts raced through their minds, the military leaders gathered there felt both excitement and concern. After all, if such powerful weapons could be developed by one nation, it was reasonable to assume that others might also be capable of creating them. If the other side got hold of such weapons, and they had no countermeasures, the anxiety among the leaders escalated. An Air Force general immediately asked an expert, academician Ma, "Does the Academy have any plans for countering electromagnetic pulse weapons? If the enemy gets their hands on such weapons, and we have no countermeasures, that would be terrifying." As soon as he finished speaking, all the generals turned their attention to the expert. Ma was momentarily taken aback. He had intended to say that such technology would never be acquired by the enemy. However, realizing that no one would believe that, he shifted his gaze towards an elder colleague. "Rest assured, everyone, our Academy already has a plan." The elder replied with a slight smile, slowly waving his hand. In the distance, a vehicle came speeding towards them. As the group watched in confusion, it stopped in front of their camp, and a soldier jumped out, holding a drone. The drone was immediately launched into the air and flew for a while before landing back in the soldier's hands. "What is this?" The leaders wondered, puzzled. "Are we about to see a demonstration of drone flight?" This drone is placed 5 kilometers away from the epicenter by the Academy of Sciences." Zhu Lao smiled faintly and introduced, "When we developed the spear, we were already researching the shield. The circuit board of this drone uses a new type of composite material that can block electromagnetic pulses within a certain distance." The Air Force leader couldn't help but smile widely upon hearing this. "It means that our troops can continue to advance despite electromagnetic pulses, while the enemy's radars and other equipment would be rendered useless without resistance. The enemy's air defense systems would be disabled, along with communications and all electronic components. The drone would also go offline directly." Imagining that scene made the Air Force leader almost laugh uncontrollably. It is well known that modern warfare is a contest of air superiority. Without an air defense system, our country could easily overpower even the strongest military. With this weapon and this anti-electromagnetic pulse technology, who else on this planet could pose a threat? Chapter 43. Trouble has arrived in a certain defense ministry. Fred sat seriously in the main seat. flanked by military representatives and generals. Gentlemen, we are facing a very serious issue. Looking at the maps spread out on the conference table, Fred's demeanor was unprecedentedly grave. He pointed at the map with a stick and said loudly, "Our dominance over the world is facing an unprecedented challenge. Countries in Eurasia are systematically removing the pins we have planted. The Eurasian continent is the largest landmass and is also rich in population and resources. It is an area of interest that we cannot afford to lose. Originally, due to the 3 pins we planted on the continent, Britain, the Star of David, and Japan, this ancient and vast continent was under our control. However, with the rise of major countries in the East, everything has changed. Our position is facing serious challenges, which is something we absolutely cannot allow. We, as representatives of global civilization, cannot permit such a thing to happen. Gentlemen, we must make a choice." Fred's expression was serious, and his attitude was unquestionable. The generals exchanged glances and nodded at each other. "Mr. President, we don't believe we are at such a crisis point. Are you still dreaming of being invincible and having all countries in awe?" Upon hearing someone rebut him, Fred's face darkened. However, since they were in the defense ministry, he couldn't act recklessly, so he could only retort, "In the Middle East, we are threatened by Iran. In the North, we are threatened by the other side. In Eastern Europe, they are not afraid of you at all. In East Asia, does that Eastern country fear you? Admit it, you are overwhelmed right now. You have wasted too much time in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. But the top priority now is to deal with that country across the ocean. We absolutely cannot allow it to succeed." Fred shouted sternly, his eyes wide and his demeanor aggressive. He was determined to get a statement from the military. The next focus was to weaken the Eastern power. It absolutely could not be allowed to continue developing like this. If it dared to land on the moon today, it would dare to challenge us tomorrow. Fred could not let them succeed. How dare those individuals come to claim the crown of civilization on Earth? Your Excellency, you have a point. They have indeed reached a stage we cannot ignore. The military representative nodded slightly, paused for a moment, and said, "What do you need us to do? We will cooperate with you." Hearing that the military finally relented, a faint smile appeared on Fred's face. He nodded slightly. He had convinced them. His plan was about to officially begin. "Very well, it seems you are not entirely foolish. Just cooperate with us from here on out. With my combination of tactics, the other side will definitely compromise." Fred smirked. "Eastern power? I will press you down on the beach just the same." December 6th. This was supposed to be an ordinary day. However, a certain entity transformed it into an extraordinarily unusual day. Today, the government launched the largest anti-dumping investigation against a certain country in history. The few major companies involved were all significant high-tech research and development firms in that country. Reports indicated that the government initiated anti-dumping investigations against 320 companies. Targeting the East, they were looking for trouble. How would we respond? The anti-dumping ruling was shocking. It was blatant plunder. A real-life version of The Wolf is coming. When the government released the list of companies under investigation and the penalties involved, the global investment community was stunned. Among the names on the list was a critically important company, Global Mining. This was a firm from that country, usually low-key but with significant backing. It held absolute mining rights in several African nations, the Far East region, Greenland, and the Arctic. This was a sharp tool for expanding the economy abroad, especially in the Far East, which was a virgin land never before explored by humanity. The ground was rich in oil, natural gas, and more than 20 types of industrial raw materials, so abundant, it was frightening. According to the agreement between that country and another nation, when the latter expanded westward to block pressure from certain alliances, the former could develop the Far East without restraint, providing some shares to the latter in return. The driving force behind this beneficial exchange was global mining. It could be said that developing the Far East was a crucial path for the country's future. It was tied to the fate of the nation. However, the government chose this critical moment to target global mining. What were they trying to accomplish? As for the so-called ruling from the government, the Eastern power paid it no mind. A contract without a signature was just a pile of worthless paper, let alone such a baseless ruling. Ridiculous. You think you can use your laws to cut down a company from the East? What were you drinking? You should take a look in the mirror. Do you really think you fit the role? Even on the internet, many netizens have been mocking this news, saying, "This country is missing out on benefits, has gone mad, and is now facing consequences." It seems the last moon landing was too much of a stimulus. It's quite amusing to see them acting out again, demanding absolute control over the shares. This is outright theft, isn't it? Remove the question marks, and it becomes clear that it's blatant theft. Have they had too much of their own medicine? That little guy is just trying to provoke. Honestly, this ruling is even more ridiculous than the arbitration in the South China Sea. They have pinned an unfounded charge just to seize absolute control of a mining company. They really dare to think that way. No one is taking this ruling seriously. Everyone is telling them to get lost as far as possible. Yet, this country is still not satisfied. The matter is not over. After the ruling was announced, a judge from the highest court of that country, Robert, shamelessly delivered a video speech. In front of the camera, he held his head high, exuding arrogance, impatiently shouting, "The legal representative of the mining company must immediately come to this country to transfer the shares or face the consequences." He hopes that some countries provide shelter. Otherwise, they will face the consequences. The repetition of "face the consequences" is quite condescending. Robert's attitude was extremely haughty, as if it were a great honor for others to come to his country. Fang Jing also saw this video in the underground base. After understanding the situation, he was so angry that he laughed. How dare they overstep their bounds? This time, whoever backs down is the loser. They still want to force us to submit. It didn't work in 2016, and it's now 2023. Dream on. Chapter 44. This operation has been learned and mastered. This country has set up a private court, declaring the mining company illegal and demanding a transfer of ownership. I can't believe it. All the people from that country who heard about this wished they could go and scold that country. They are really pushing their luck. Naturally, the Eastern Power is not backing down at all. They are responding with strong and resolute diplomatic language. Agreeing? What a joke. If I agree, I'd become the laughingstock. The situation seems to be reverting to 2016, like the arbitration case. The Eastern Power is ignoring the unilateral arbitration results and is not giving it any attention. They even continue to send warships to cruise near their doorstep. This time is no different. That same day, just an hour after Robert's video was released, a missile from the northwest was already soaring through the sky. The Eastern Power's message is clear. Don't mess with us. See what this is. And then, in a flash, the rocket forces were deployed. Of course, the stubborn country will not let it go easily. However, it turns out that the aircraft carrier station in Yokosuka was scheduled for periodic maintenance, so they could only send 2 aircraft carriers from their homeland to prepare for pressure tactics in the South China Sea. To be honest, this situation is not new for our country. We've been through it more than once, and this time we are not afraid. If they come, then let them come. It will take almost a month to reach the combat position. I will be stationed on the shore, feeling like we can just spar a bit. A month is enough time for the other side to calm down. A joint meeting of the 3 armed forces is anticipated. I estimate it will end up being a lot of fuss with little outcome, leaving them unable to back down. An old officer from the army spoke up, suspecting that this was just the other side trying to stir up trouble. This possibility is quite high, but we must remain vigilant. The leader of the rocket force frowned and said, "We will set up mobile defenses along the coast to prevent the other side from acting out of desperation." Indeed. That makes sense. We must take this seriously, and the Navy will cooperate when the time comes. The Navy leader nodded. The situation does show signs of crisis. Although not severe, they cannot afford to let their guard down. Wait, how is the Navy's upgrade to counter electromagnetic pulses progressing? At this moment, the Air Force leader spoke up, wearing a confident smile, showing no signs of tension. Several large destroyers have been completed. The Navy leader was slightly taken aback, looking at the Air Force leader with confusion, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean? Hee. Our Air Force has a squadron that has completed the counter-electromagnetic pulse upgrade. The Air Force leader smiled slightly, looking around, suddenly feeling reassured. Since both the Navy and my Air Force have made some progress in the counter-electromagnetic pulse modifications, what do we have to fear? We have kinetic weapons. With a month left, let us ramp up production on the assembly line. If they dare to act recklessly by then, we'll break their legs, making them hop out of the Asia-Pacific on 1 foot. The Air Force leader finished speaking, then calmly sat back in his seat, showing no signs of panic. The other leaders thought for a moment. Indeed, strategically, it's enough to pay attention to the opponent. But when it comes to actual combat, electromagnetic pulse weapons will be firing everywhere. At that point, who will care about these things? Alright, let us proceed like this. Exactly. Other defenses will also be prepared, and kinetic weapons will serve as the final cornerstone. If they dare to come, we will pin them down in the Asia-Pacific. Damn it. We long wanted to deal with them. Time quietly passed for 5 days. The so-called anti-dumping case fell silent. Just when everyone thought the other side was done losing their minds. France, nighttime, at a coastal station. It was night, and a banquet was being held at a distant estate. 2 casually dressed individuals approached a residence quietly. The young and less experienced Mike felt a bit nervous as he looked at his teammate, the more experienced Aaron. What should we do, Aaron? Just rush in. They are not in the room. They are at the banquet. No need to worry, Mike. Aaron, sporting a long mustache and wearing a small painter's hat, with a cigar in his mouth, spoke with a cold and decisive tone. Without waiting for Mike to respond, he walked out from the alley and quickly rushed up the stairs. Mike was startled and hurried to follow him. He led Mike to a door. I'll open it. Mike felt that his opportunity to perform had come, and he immediately took out a complete set of lockpicking tools, ready to make a big move. However, Aaron didn't let him at all. He just glanced at the door and, without any hesitation, kicked it open with a powerful kick. Bang! The closed wooden door was kicked wide open. I really prefer these wooden doors. The anti-theft doors are the most annoying design of the 21st century. Muttering to himself, Aaron shook his legs and nodded toward Mike, who was standing there in disbelief. You're still too green for this. Embarrassed, Mike put away his lockpicking tools and followed Aaron inside. Search! Aaron shouted, immediately starting to look around. Mike also began rummaging through everything. There's a safe. In the corner of the room, Mike discovered a hidden safe embedded in the wall. By the time Aaron came over, Mike had already used his excellent lockpicking skills to open the safe. Proudly raising his lockpicking tool, he excitedly said, It's an old model from 2003. I only took 15 seconds. Well done, Mike, Aaron chuckled. The two of them opened the safe together. Inside, there was only a stack of cash, about $5,000. And nothing else. Aaron, was the intel from our contact wrong? There's no data on stolen scientific research from the Eastern superpower here. Seeing the empty safe, Mike felt somewhat disappointed. So, did they fail this mission? Looking at Mike's expression, Aaron smiled gently. This kid is still too young. Patting Mike's shoulder. Aaron exhaled a puff of smoke, reached into his coat pocket, and said earnestly, Mike, can you guess why the task assigned by the higher-ups was to bring back data instead of just searching? Why? Mike, who was still unfamiliar with the agency's operations, looked puzzled. Right? How would they know there would be documents here if they didn't even search? Heh, Aaron sneered, slowly withdrawing his hand from his coat pocket. He pulled out a document from inside and, under Mike's astonished gaze, placed it slowly into the empty safe. After placing it, Aaron turned back and quietly looked at Mike. Continuing, because there must be a document here, no matter how it got here. Mike, we lie, we deceive, we steal. We even have a specific course that teaches these things. This is the glory of our constant exploration and advancement. You still have a lot to learn. After giving Mike, who stood there in shock, a pat on the back, Aaron walked straight out. Our mission is complete. The next part is up to the local authorities. Mike, we should leave. Mike remained frozen in place. Wow, it can be done this way? They didn't steal the documents, but just toss something into the safe? What kind of operation is this? Goodness, I've really learned a lot. Chapter 45, Defamation, Barefaced Defamation. On the morning of December 12th, the government of a certain European country announced that a piece of news quickly topped the global media trending charts. Media outlets in various regions dedicated an entire page to report this incident. A scientist from a certain country, Jiangsu, was accused of stealing construction data for the TIER International Fusion Reactor project and has now been detained by local police. Once this news broke, it was rapidly reprinted by media worldwide. Particularly, some unscrupulous domestic media outlets took the opportunity to craft exaggerated headlines to attract attention. The Chinese internet was suddenly flooded with various reports. Shocking. This scientist actually did something like this. He has brought shame upon us. Jiangsu is jeopardizing our future. So what if we landed on the moon? Energy is the future, and we have already been kicked out of it. The exaggerated headlines were truly remarkable. Some reports, clearly biased, seemed to be pushing a narrative against the backdrop of the situation. The ITER project is an international collaboration for a nuclear fusion reactor, established by several countries including those from Europe, Asia, and beyond. Its goal is to collaboratively develop a large-scale scientific experimental device aimed at achieving controllable nuclear fusion. It can be said that the ITER device was designed from the outset to ultimately realize controllable nuclear fusion. So far, this represents humanity's only glimmer of hope, a massive artifact created through collective effort. As the news spread, some individuals who had previously been suppressed began to mock and ridicule. What is so great about landing on the moon? Haha. Fundamental scientific research and energy research are what truly matter. Just wait for the ITER project to be scrapped. Haha. A place of uncivilization. Haha. The achievements of decades ago are still being flaunted. How shameless. They speculated that with the project expected to be completed by 2025, this country would fall behind yet again in the energy revolution. While everyone awaited official confirmation, these clowns couldn't wait to jump out and make their voices heard. It's truly an inevitable situation. In a vast population, there are bound to be all sorts of people. Just think about it. If there's one fool in 10,000, in a population of 1 per billion, how many would that be? It's hard to imagine. At the Western Mountain Base, Fang Jing also saw this news. Immediately, he was certain that Jiangsu would never do such a thing. In fact, he didn't even know Jiangsu personally. So why was he so sure? Because it was simple. The main body of the ITER project had not even been completed, and the largest components were just shipped from a certain country, likely still en route to the Indian Ocean. The construction wasn't even finished. How could one steal construction data? Moreover, the majority of the construction components were provided by that country. Anyone with a bit of insider knowledge could see that this was a smear campaign, targeted slander. Fang Jing's ability to understand the underlying issues meant that those in higher positions could also grasp it. Coincidentally, an elder named Zhu was located in the underground section of the Western Mountain Base and saw the news. Zhu Lao was so furious that he felt like he could explode. He immediately called the director of the Plasma Research Institute. Hello? Is this Zhu Lao? Yes, it's me. Zhu Jincheng. Have you seen the news? Yes, Zhu Lao, we have. Jiangsu could not have done this. It makes no sense. The person on the other end of the line thought Zhu Lao was calling to demand an explanation, and the director of the Plasma Institute felt a bit flustered. However, he firmly believed in Jiangsu. Jiangsu was sent to France by their research institute, and he trusted his character completely. I'm not here to demand an explanation. I unconditionally trust our scientist. Now, I need you to assure me. Did you privately ask Jiangsu to do anything? No, we absolutely did not. Realizing that Zhu Lao wanted a unified stance, the director of the Plasma Institute immediately felt relieved and responded affirmatively. That's good. Zhu Lao paused for a moment and then sternly said, immediately halt the ITER project. How dare they slander us? Cooperation? What cooperation? Zhu Lao, the problem lies here. The director of the Plasma Institute said with a bitter face, feeling somewhat helpless, the last component we provided has already arrived in the Indian Ocean. And the timing is quite targeted. So, they are using us and then preparing to kick us out? Zhu Lao's voice turned cold, and his tone changed. Exactly. They likely have that intention. Good, very good. Zhu Lao was almost laughing with anger. Alright, if they don't want me to play, then let us not play at all. With a resolute heart, Zhu Lao narrowed his eyes. You think you can tear up the agreement? I can too. You don't need to worry about this matter. I will handle it entirely. In the afternoon, Wu Yud, the president of the Academy of Sciences, personally held a press conference. At the press conference, reporters from various countries were eagerly awaiting. When Wu Yud walked out, the reporters pounced like sharks sensing blood, frantically inquiring about the theft of confidential data in France. President Wu, France claims to be negotiating with our country. Did Jiangsu really steal construction data? President Wu, could you please answer? President Wu, will this incident affect our plans for controlled nuclear fusion? Bang, bang. Wu Yud became somewhat impatient with the noise from the reporters. He slammed his hands on the table twice, showing a hint of displeasure, and sternly said, "Quiet. Everyone, please maintain silence." The reporters gradually quieted down. Once it was completely silent, Wu Yud then spoke loudly. "I know what you all want to ask. I am here specifically for this matter. Regarding my colleague, Comrade Jiangsu, our stance is." Noticing that the reporters below had started typing rapidly on their keyboards, Wu Yud paused for a moment, completely unconcerned, and spoke with a heavy and resolute voice. "He absolutely did not steal the ITER data, and we will formally negotiate with the French government regarding this matter. This is a blatant slander and frame-up by certain entities and their followers. We do not accept such slander and frame-ups. Furthermore, due to the unjust treatment and slander against our scientific personnel by the French government, our country is officially withdrawing from the TIR project starting today." After saying this, Wu Yu left angrily. The reporters left behind were all stunned. This was a clear statement, wasn't it? As a result, that afternoon, an overwhelming amount of news broke out. The country announces withdrawal from the ITER project, strongly supporting Jiangsu. He could never have stolen anything. The truth will out. This is nothing but slander and rumors from certain countries and their followers. This time, the government displayed an unprecedented strength. They were determined to protect Jiangsu. Chapter 46. Are they really that fearless? After the news release regarding the government's support for Jiangsu, everyone breathed a sigh of relief with the official designation. However, there was still great regret about the withdrawal from ITER. It's outrageous. The ITER project was just a few years away from completion, and now, this country is pulling the rug out from under us. The person upstairs is right. Damn it, they could have just kicked him out directly. I'm heartbroken. Yet they gave you an excuse. Two fools upstairs. You believe the official denial. I think Jiangsu must have stolen something. The withdrawal is just to save face. Yes. 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 Don't wander around. Go back to your trash can. Damn. Why are there people from that country everywhere? Go back to your homeland. Your government is holding a funeral for astronauts, and you're not going to pay your respects? Hurry up and leave. All the netizens were very indignant. The reason was simple. Anyone who knew about the ITER project understood. This was humanity's hope for controllable nuclear fusion. With this country withdrawing, the research progress would fall far behind. Energy is the foundation of industry, the very root. A strong sense of crisis made them feel very uneasy. Everyone felt a sense of being collectively kicked out of the fourth energy revolution. This country missed the first industrial revolution and the second, leading to a century of weakness and suffering. Although they only grasped a bit of the third information revolution, they had finally caught up. Now, at this critical juncture of the fourth energy revolution, they were actually kicked out by a coalition. How could this not infuriate them? This was practically forcing the country back to an era of humiliation. They absolutely agreed on this matter. Zhu Jinsheng returned to the capital overnight, disregarding his exhaustion. He immediately met with the leader. The leader was resting in his study, reading a book on multiverse theory. Upon seeing Zhu enter, he slightly raised his head and said softly, "Old Zhu, you came for that matter with France?" "Yes." Old Zhu lightly hummed, his face showing a cold expression, suppressing the anger in his chest. Did they want to take advantage of the situation? So much money was invested, and they thought they could just kick him out as they pleased? Absolutely not. They couldn't be allowed to succeed easily. The leader nodded slightly, gently putting down his book, chuckled, and then took out a world map, pointing to the Indian Ocean, and said lightly, "I heard that the components we provided for ITER have reached the Indian Ocean and are about to arrive at the Red Sea." "Exactly." Zhu Lao squinted slightly, noticing a small circle drawn around the area near Yemen. He widened his eyes in surprise, thinking to himself how unexpected it was that the top leader had already made a firm decision. Just look at the countries on both sides of the Red Sea, with two big circles drawn over them. Doesn't that make the intention clear enough? Feeling a surge of delight, he immediately asked, "We absolutely cannot let what we've built go to waste." At this moment, Zhu Lao already had a feeling that the top leader would definitely support him. He agreed to let things be done carefully. The top leader didn't hesitate. "What a joke, so much money, and you think I would let it go to waste? You're dreaming." With a slight smirk, Zhu Lao snorted. "You may have the advantage now, but I won't let you have it easy either." At the entrance of the Mandeb Strait, a large merchant ship was slowly sailing. On board, Soren was enjoying the sea breeze, feeling a bit stifled inside the cabin. Looking at the seabirds soaring freely in the sky, he sighed deeply. "What's wrong, Soren? Are you thinking about your hometown again?" Norton came out of the cabin, hands behind his back, and upon getting closer, he excitedly took out a bottle of red wine. "I do miss it a bit. Where did you get this?" Soren turned around, and his face lit up upon seeing the wine. "This is from my father's estate. It tastes great, and I brought a few bottles with me." Pouring a glass elegantly for Soren, Norton joked, "By the end of the month, we'll be in France. This damned mission will finally be over." "Yeah." As Soren took the wine glass to his lips, he suddenly had second thoughts. "We can't drink. What if we run into pirates? We need to stay alert to protect the ITER equipment." "Forget about that damned equipment. Look at the vast sea. There are no other ships around. Where would the pirates come from?" Norton expressed his dissatisfaction, waving his hands dramatically and shouting towards the ocean. Hey, pirate, we're over here. Come find us. After his shout, the sea remained unchanged, and Norton was quite pleased. He pouted slightly, raised his glass, and shrugged, saying, Soren, we're under the protection of a military base. We're a UN ship flying the joint flag of 17 nations. Which pirate would be foolish enough to target us? You are too sensitive. Perhaps it's the thought of going home that makes you anxious? The excitement of reuniting with family after a long separation can indeed be overwhelming. Maybe I'm just too anxious. After hearing Norton's words, Soren also felt that he might be too sensitive. He smiled slightly and said, all right, you've convinced me. Let us. Just as he was about to toast with Norton, Norton suddenly froze in place. It turned out that several small black dots had suddenly appeared on the distant sea. Quick, get the binoculars. Dropping what he was holding, Norton immediately found a pair of binoculars. As he focused, his expression changed drastically. Sorrow, there are unidentified vessels approaching. Black flags, it's pirates. Hurry, alert the guards. After getting a clear view through the binoculars, Norton felt his legs weaken. He never expected to actually encounter pirates. How dare these pirates attack? This was a joint merchant ship flying the flags of 17 nations. Were they really that fearless? Chapter 47. Are they going to do it again? Norton and Soren never imagined that in this troubled region, someone would dare to rob them. All the guards on the ship were alerted. Arriving at the side of the ship, the chief guard had a serious expression. Have the captain send out a distress signal immediately. See if there are any naval ships nearby. Captain, there is, the captain replied. 50 nautical miles away, there is a naval ship from a certain country. The communication officer of the guards immediately reported this to the captain. Quick, send out a distress signal now. Yes. Upon learning that there was a naval ship nearby, Norton and Soren on board immediately felt relieved. But it was a pity for them, having drifted at sea for a full 3 months. They were unaware that subtle changes had occurred in the outside world. Moreover, the scene of them asking a certain naval ship for help was quite comical. Beep beep beep. The urgent alarm sounded on the ship, and the armed guards quickly gathered on the side facing the island. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Load the bullets. The chief guard, with a serious expression, anxiously deployed his orders. Once we reach shooting distance, fire directly, without hesitation. If those damned pirates get close to the ship, they'll climb aboard like monkeys. Your job is to kill them before they can board. These guards were mercenaries provided by a certain country, experienced in actual combat, and had previously undertaken missions in Africa. Normally, dealing with such pirates would be easy. However, it was clear that this group of pirates was not ordinary. Just as the chief guard picked up the binoculars, he was shocked and shouted, Get down, RPG. Through the binoculars, he clearly saw that the pirates, as they approached shooting distance, pulled out a row of RPGs without hesitation and immediately pulled the trigger. This group of pirates was not playing by the rules. Who charges in with RPGs right away? Whoosh, whoosh, boom. The deafening explosion sounded as an astonishing number of rockets struck, leaving the mercenaries stunned. Quick, find cover, shoot, shoot. Suppress the fire, don't give them a chance to react. As his orders were given, the sound of gunfire erupted. The team members, startled by the explosion of rockets, were forced to scatter in search of cover and had to poke their heads out to fire back at the pirates. For a moment, the pirate ship was compelled to slow down, creating some distance from the merchant vessel. Their target was the aft compartment. Hurry, stop them. The captain of the guard keenly noticed their intentions. They aimed to blow up the merchant ship's power system, completely trapping them here. Under his watch, as they approached the stern, the damned pirates finally revealed what was covered with waterproof cloth on their ship. As the cloth was lifted, it turned out to be a mass of tubes, with an estimated diameter of 107 millimeters. The captain of the guard squinted his eyes as he observed closely. He noticed that the pirates were stuffing rocket launchers into these tubes. Rocket launchers with batteries and wires attached to their backs. Damn it, it's the 63 type. The captain roared, his eyes wide with shock. The 63 type from a certain country, known as the AK-47 of rocket launchers. It's simple to replicate, easy to activate, and straightforward to launch, making it a guerrilla warfare favorite, known for being cheap and durable. This rocket launcher is so simple that it can be set directly in the ground and can fire just by connecting a battery. Although simple, its power should not be underestimated. No, seeing this thing being brought out, the captain felt despair. They didn't have such rocket launchers. How could they fight back? Boom, boom, boom. After several deafening explosions, the metal fragments from the blast severed the propellers at the stern. Crack, with a loud noise from the transmission device. The massive merchant vessel lost power and came to a halt. Damn, how could their firepower be so fierce? The merchant ship was forced to stop, and they were like lambs to the slaughter. Facing the enemy's firepower, the captain felt utterly powerless, hoping for a distant naval vessel from a certain country to come to their rescue. Even a helicopter would be enough to scare these damned pirates away. No miracle occurred. An hour later, when the fleet from that country arrived, they immediately dispatched a helicopter to gather intelligence. The helicopter relayed the situation around the merchant ship, leaving the captain bewildered. What were these pirates after? These pirates were incredibly bold. Even when they saw the naval vessel, they showed no intention of leaving, allowing the helicopter to fly overhead while they frantically searched for something on their ship. Moreover, as the footage zoomed in, the captain's eyes narrowed. Although these pirates indeed looked like locals from Central Asia, their gestures while wielding AKs were so familiar. Didn't they just train a group of naval soldiers in Yemen? That leader looked somewhat familiar too. Hiss. As if realizing something, the captain suddenly understood. No wonder these pirates were so strange. The merchant ship was hijacked, and the pirates showed no interest in the ransom. Instead, they were busy causing destruction on board. It was as if they were there solely for the purpose of wreaking havoc. As they moved along, they blew things up. Suddenly, the captain seemed to have realized something. Narrowing his eyes. How interesting, truly fascinating. The people above were indeed ruthless, even keeping secrets from him, the captain. However, there was an inexplicable satisfaction in having guessed it right. To that end, the captain even deliberately slowed down the ship. Thus, before the naval forces arrived, the pirates successfully made their escape. On the merchant ship, all the guards who had been disarmed breathed a sigh of relief, except for Norton and Soren, who felt like they wanted to die. It was over, completely over. Those damned pirates had blown up the main components of the ITER project provided by both the local and another country. The components from the latter were not a big deal. They could be quickly reproduced since the technology wasn't advanced. But the situation was problematic for the components from the former. The structure being transported was the most critical part of the ITER project. The first wall that would face the ultra-high temperature plasma. It required micron-level precision and used techniques that were only mastered by that country. Other nations simply did not have the processing experience or capability, and now it had been destroyed by pirates. This group of barbaric thieves had directly ruined the light of civilization. Because of this damage, the ITER project would likely be delayed for several more years. The 50-meter diameter first wall could only be manufactured by that country. Norton stood in the sea breeze, wishing he could slap himself twice. This was what he got for talking nonsense. What could he do now? Were they supposed to ask that country to make another one? Chapter 48. Welcome back in the presidential office. A certain country's leader was fuming. He slammed the documents on his desk to the ground. Fuck. It was definitely that country's doing. The merchant ship transporting ITER components was attacked by pirates in the strait, and the components provided by both that country and another were directly destroyed. Especially the first wall from that country, which was completely blown to pieces. Those pirates were truly outrageous. No, it was that country. They had blown up the first wall components multiple times. As if they were afraid others wouldn't know it was their doing. That was equipment worth over 5 billion. He recalled that this was something he had specifically targeted to seize. Even though it was just an accessory, he believed that what was seized was rightfully his. He felt immense pain and frustration. This was their sacred property. What was even more disgusting was that a terrorist organization from a certain region had claimed responsibility for it. Damn it. Do you really have the capability to locate that merchant ship to take responsibility for it? Just then, as he was venting his anger on the things in his office, General Caven from the Defense Department knocked on the door and opened it to come in. Mr. President? Caven thought he shouldn't have opened the door. Now he and the leader were making awkward eye contact. The awkward moment came when Fred was holding a porcelain vase high, angrily contemplating smashing it. With a blank expression, he silently set the vase down and said, General Caven, please remember to observe etiquette next time. Not before entering. And you better bring me good news. Fred's voice was suppressed, and he resolved that if Caven was here for trivial matters, he would make him regret it. Yes, Your Excellency, Caven replied dryly, then abruptly shifted the topic, stating seriously, when the warships from the eastern nation left the harbor, we took the opportunity to relocate the carrier fleet. The fleet is currently navigating around the Indian Ocean, and our satellites are providing cover. They will receive the news by the time they reach the Strait of Malacca. Fred's eyes lit up with joy, and he raised an eyebrow, warmly pulling Caven to sit across from him. How long until we reach Malacca? Caven was taken aback by Fred's sudden change in demeanor. Realizing it might be a politician's chameleon tactic, he removed his hat and responded solemnly. It should be by the end of the month when the fleet from the homeland meets up. Good, very good. Fred spread out a world map on his desk, narrowing his eyes at the first island chain. As long as we block the entrance to the eastern nation, no matter how much they bluster, they won't be able to threaten us again. At that time, we will once again be great. General Caven, you must supervise the fleet's progress closely. There must be no mistakes. This is very important. Caven understood the significance and nodded earnestly, his gaze resolute, agreeing, Don't worry. Your Excellency, this matter is in our hands. December 21st was a peculiar day. On one hand, just days before, the Eastern nation had announced its withdrawal from the ITER International Nuclear Fusion Project and ensured the safe return of Jiangsu. Jiangsu and the scientists stationed in France were already on their way back home. While still on the plane, no one expected the retaliation to come so swiftly. Explosive news emerged from the Red Sea port. ITER was attacked by pirates while passing through the Mandeb Strait. Components provided by the Eastern nation and India were destroyed, and the terrorist organization RS claimed responsibility. This news was released by state media, and afterward, many self-media outlets, known for fabricating stories, obediently shared it. After all, those in self-media weren't foolish. Just days ago, the Eastern nation had been forced to withdraw from an international cooperative organization, and now, the components it provided had been destroyed. It felt inherently wrong, as if one could easily identify the culprit, yet lacked evidence. Given this feeling, would these self-media outlets dare to spread rumors? They would be waiting to be dealt with otherwise. However, the comments section was quite lively. The rabbit hid the knife behind its back and weakly asked, Why are you all looking at me? Ha ha ha, daring to burn bridges after crossing them. I'll just take care of you. If you're not playing with me, then you all can't play either. That cunning rabbit did a great job. So, The ones who arrogantly claimed we would miss the fourth energy revolution. Come out and speak. Turning to the upstairs, this group of cowards dared not say a word. Damn it, going straight for the jugular, that feels good. Seeing the rabbit act so rogue, I felt completely at ease. Regarding the case of Jiangsu being slandered, the atmosphere across the nation is quite tense. This time, it really vented frustrations. Aren't you all the ones wanting to burn bridges? I'll just cut off the river under the bridge. No one gets to play? At the airport in the capital, a silver passenger plane gradually descended. People gathered on both sides, holding flowers and singing songs. A military vehicle appeared outside the plane staircase, and Zhu Jinshin got out, quietly waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Next to him stood the chief of technology, Wu Yud, respectfully beside Zhu. The cabin door of the passenger plane opened, the staircase connected, and a group of weary scientists walked out with expressions of despair. Leading them was Jiangsu, looking tired, unshaven, with a mix of excitement and fear in his eyes. He was wronged, but had been rescued by his homeland. All the way, he was filled with gratitude for his country, but also guilt. After all, because of him, his nation had to withdraw from the ITER project. Although the project was progressing slowly, a significant amount of funds had already been invested. This was no small sum. Now it was all ruined. Even if the higher-ups ensured his safety, how would his colleagues, his family, and the people of the nation view him? He thought that as he got closer to his beloved homeland, this feeling would ease. However, until he landed. Until he stepped out of the cabin and saw the dense crowd outside, his heart immediately lifted. His feet felt as heavy as lead as he slowly descended the stairs. Zhu Jinshin walked over, followed closely by Wu Yud. The two approached Jiangsu, said nothing, and simply embraced him gently. Welcome back, Professor Jiang. Zhu Jinshin patted Jiangsu's shoulder. Though old, his hands were incredibly firm. He looked at Jiangsu's exhausted face, into his eyes, and spoke emphatically. We, our nation, will always be your support. Now you are safe. Jiangsu looked around. The welcoming personnel were cheering, and the accompanying scientists trusted him completely. Especially the elderly man who came to greet him in person. Finally, the deep resentment from being slandered, coupled with his longing for his homeland, made this man cry for the first time. He cried wholeheartedly, no longer holding back. Chapter 49. Packing up and leaving Jiangsu and the scholars from the Plasma Research Institute received a warm welcome from Old Zhu. After the group had lunch at a restaurant, the convoy gradually moved away. Old Zhu, about this matter in the car, Jiangsu sighed, preparing to express his apologies. After all, the nation sent him to France to closely follow the cutting edge of international controllable nuclear fusion research. But now, things have gone awry. No matter what, he feels some responsibility for it. All right, Professor Jiang, there's no need to say much. This matter is not your fault. Old Zhu noticed what he wanted to say, pressed his hand down, indicating that he understood and there was no need for further explanation. With a smile, Old Zhu gave Wu Yud a knowing glance. Oh, Old Jiang, let me show you something good to brighten your day. Wu Yud chuckled and pulled out his phone, opened the screen, and handed it to Jiangsu. What? Jiangsu looked gratefully at Old Zhu and then took the phone with confusion. As he held it in his hand and took a look, his eyes widened in surprise, and joy spread across his face. Serves them right. That is a great explosion. Seeing the ITER components blown up, Jiangsu couldn't help but applaud. His mood instantly lifted. How dare they frame me, kick my country out, and play a bridge-burning game. Dream on. Haha, we knew you would be happy to see this. Old Zhu laughed heartily. At the same time, he glanced out at the dense forest outside the window, watched Jiangsu carefully studying the news, and smiled for no apparent reason. Soon, he claimed to be old and in need of rest, taking a short nap, while letting Wu Yud continue to entertain a whole van of scholars. The vehicle kept moving, and the scholars on board were still excited, sharing their thoughts and expressing their longing for home. But as they continued, they gradually came to their senses. Why are we going further and further off course? Jiangsu suddenly woke up, looked at the time on his phone, and frowned sharply. Has it already been 4 hours? Isn't this the vehicle to the Academy of Sciences? Seeing the armored vehicles passing by on the road, Jiangsu suddenly realized. This vehicle has long left the capital. Lao Wu, where is this vehicle headed? Aren't we supposed to be going back to the Academy of Sciences to report? Realizing what was happening, Jiangsu narrowed his eyes and immediately fixed his gaze on Wu Yud. Old Zhu is taking a nap now, we can't disturb him. Wu Yud looked around. He noticed that the other scholars in the vehicle had also reacted, all looking at him with puzzled expressions, feeling a bit helpless. Damn, I was just trying to chat, and ended up getting found out. Lao Wu, stop joking around, just tell me the truth. Next to him, Professor Sure adjusted his glasses. He estimated that after 4 hours, they were almost in Inner Mongolia, right? Are they sending us into the desert? What is going on? In an instant, the scholars in the vehicle sharpened their gazes like sharks smelling blood. A nuclear physicist was the first to react, visibly excited. Inner Mongolia. This is where the earliest secret nuclear weapons research institute is located. No way, we have a whole van of people. Jiangsu on the chartered vehicle also reacted, his expression shifting from doubt to excitement. Well, actually, I don't know either. Wu Yud helplessly waved his hand. You old fool, do you want to die? Professor Sure narrowed his eyes and immediately stood up, ready to throw a punch at Wu Yud. I'm a nuclear physicist. Isn't it reasonable to deal with you using physics? Of course, this was a joke. The two were old classmates and had a good relationship. Yes, Wu Yud, confess honestly. Or I'll expose all your dirt from when you were with Mentor Chung. Nearby, the nuclear physics professor, who had first sensed something was off, lowered his voice, fearing to disturb Zhu Lao. However, his tone was filled with teasing. No, 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 I really don't know. I was brought here by Zhu Lao. We had felt like he could die. This whole group included his university classmates and his doctoral senior. It was a complete set of embarrassing secrets. If things went south, social death awaited. Really don't know? Professor Sure squinted. Really don't know? Another professor's gaze sharpened. Really, why would I lie to you? Seeing the questioning looks from his good friends, Wu Yud felt a sharp pain in his heart. Don't you believe me? He truly didn't know anything and was just bewilderedly brought along. Look outside. At that moment, a scholar by the car window suddenly pointed outside and exclaimed. Everyone in the car immediately turned their attention to the window. What is that? Jiang Su slowly stood up from his seat, staring at the end of the road in the distance, his pupils suddenly contracting. The vehicle had arrived at a military base. Outside the base, a company of soldiers was returning from training. If it were just an ordinary company, it wouldn't shock the people in the vehicle so much. The key was that this entire company was wearing 23-style exoskeleton armor. Over 100 soldiers, fully armed, marched down the road in a grand procession, their dark armor reflecting a chilling aura. The scene was truly spectacular. Jiang Su also noticed that his phone had completely lost signal. Not only that, but it had also started to flicker. We've arrived, everyone, let's get out. Zhu Lao had woken up at some point. Jiang Su and the others turned around to see that he had already stood at the vehicle's door, looking at everyone inside with a smile. Welcome to Xishan Base. Zhu Lao, does Xishan Base have the military secret research on controllable nuclear fusion devices? Following Zhu Lao, Jiang Su and all the accompanying scholars were extremely excited. They didn't even bother to observe the enormous military base, only continuously asking Zhu Lao about the authenticity of this news. That's right. This is also the reason I brought you here. Zhu Lao smiled slightly and replied, Xishan Base has 3 sets of devices, tokamak, stellarator, and laser fusion reactor. The domestic tokamak slots are already full. You will research here from now on. This is fantastic. Jiang Su and the others were overjoyed. They didn't care about any confidentiality agreements. They could go all the way to France. What did it matter if they buried themselves in research at Xishan Base? As long as there was something to study, that was all that mattered. Moreover, they must achieve results and give a hard slap to the faces of those who slandered him. Jiang Su clenched his fists, his gaze resolute. As expected from the scholars we specifically selected to go to France, let us go. Zhu Lao nodded in satisfaction, leading a group into the Military Research Institute at the Xishan Base. On this day, a large group of scholars related to controllable nuclear fusion technology arrived at Xishan Base. Although they had not yet been informed of the detailed information regarding the 237 project, Zhu Jinsheng brought them in specifically for this purpose. Chapter 50. What do they want to do? By the end of December, the whole country was eagerly anticipating the return of the Lunar Heroes Trio. The 3 astronauts, who had spent 17 days on the moon, were set to bring back 5 tons of lunar samples. These samples included lunar soil, rocks, and deep drilling layers. 5 tons was enough for scientists to study the entire lunar environment. The lunar spacecraft took off smoothly. To be honest, launching from the moon was significantly easier than from Earth. The main engine of the spacecraft roared to life, and in just 5 minutes, it had lifted off from the lunar surface and was on its way to a lunar orbit transfer. Success. In the Aerospace Command Hall, everyone clenched their fists in excitement and cheered loudly. At this moment, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. After the successful lunar liftoff, the only remaining significant danger was re-entry to Earth. The re-entry of the landing capsule was a phase that the country's manned spaceflight program was incredibly familiar with. With over a dozen successful Shenzhou missions, the success rate was 100. The landing capsule of the lunar spacecraft was the most reliable part of this mission and the least concerning. With the lunar mission reaching this point, it could basically be considered a success. Now, they just needed to wait 3 days for the return of the lunar heroes. At that time, the whole nation would erupt in celebration. This lunar liftoff was not live-streamed. A video was released only after the success. Success. The lunar spacecraft has successfully lifted off from the lunar surface and is now heading towards Earth. The concerned public rushed to watch the video as soon as it was released, nearly overwhelming the server of a popular platform. Ha ha ha, scrolling to the end, it was successful. And everyone felt completely at ease. Just 3 more days of patience, and they would be home. Oh, it worked, and next is the return to Earth, right? Yes, after manned lunar landing. Does the manned space office have any further plans? We want to see the lunar base. We can't wait. Bring it on. Agreed, we all agree. We want a live stream of the lunar base. Eager viewers, upon entering the video, immediately scrolled to the end. Even though the title already stated success, seeing the actual footage finally put everyone's minds at ease. They succeeded. Their heroes were coming back. At Xishan Base, Fang Jing was in the centrifuge, being spun wildly. Amidst the dizzying rotation, Fang Jing didn't even blink. The centrifuge came to a stop. He stepped out calmly, without even swaying slightly the whole time. Once outside the cabin, Uncle Yang glanced at his stopwatch, nodded in satisfaction, and exclaimed, "You've made great progress. You can now withstand 7G of overload. Keep it up, and you'll meet the standards for astronauts." He patted Fang Jing on the shoulder, acknowledging his efforts, which Uncle Yang had been watching all along. Being an astronaut requires more than just good physical fitness. Willpower, machine operation, experimental science, emergency handling, and more must be mastered comprehensively. Over these days, Fang Jing had transformed from an ordinary university student into someone capable, and Uncle Yang was well aware of the hard work behind it. Haha, after all, I am a reserve for the lunar base. Fang Jing felt a surge of happiness at the mention of the moon. It was the moon. To set foot on the moon and stay there for a while, wow, that would be something to brag about for a lifetime. Wait, Fang Jing quickly calmed himself down. The moon was nothing. Once he mastered the space gate of the wandering Earth, forget the moon. He could go on a trip to the edge of the solar system. Well, keep it up. The manned lunar landing program has just concluded. At this point, Uncle Yang was genuinely puzzled and said, however, I don't understand why old Zhu is in such a hurry. The manned lunar landing program has just ended, and the lunar base plan is already on the agenda. Xiaofeng, there is still a lot more training for you. Perhaps you and Zhou Yuan will be part of the second batch of lunar landing personnel. The news about the lunar base plan coming up shocked Fang Jing. The pace at the top was too fast. It's normal that you don't know yet. They are currently discussing how to build the base, and a draft has already been made. But things are moving quickly. Yang Su squinted his eyes, a hint of anticipation in his gaze. A lunar base truly inspires yearning. Then I really need to work hard. Fang Jing estimated that the higher-ups had seen the benefits brought by the technology of the wandering Earth and decided to allocate resources to the 237 plan. According to old Zhu, the profits from the batteries of the multidimensional era company alone had exceeded 20 billion in the past 2 months. And that as cash flow. The other hidden benefits were unimaginable. By the way, why are so many scholars here? I think there are nuclear physicists and people from the Plasma Research Lab. While chatting with Fang Jing, Uncle Yang shared the situation outside, considering Fang Jing had been training recently. Nuclear physicists? Fang Jing raised an eyebrow, quickly realizing. It seemed old Zhu was very interested in controllable nuclear fusion technology. That's right. We have relevant equipment here? Uncle Yang asked in confusion. He had only been tasked with training Fang Jing and didn't really know much about the Xishan base. Yes, and not just one. Uncle Yang. There will definitely be big news here soon. Fang Jing confidently teased Uncle Yang with a mystery. Big news. Uncle Yang raised an eyebrow, then chuckled and said with anticipation. Then I can't wait to see what surprise you will bring me. South China Sea Fleet Information Detection Center. The information officer is controlling an agricultural observation satellite to patrol the globe. After observing the situation at several overseas bases of a certain country, the officer furrows his brow. Feeling a bit uneasy. Where are the 2 aircraft carriers supporting the hexagram in the Middle East? With current satellite technology, finding the position of those carriers isn't impossible. One of the officer's usual tasks is to locate enemy carrier fleets. The Mediterranean? No. The Red Sea? None. Where could they possibly be? As he slides the controller, a sudden bad thought crosses his mind. Where could those damn carrier groups have gone? Could they be heading to East Asia? Wait. Suddenly realizing that it's quite possible they might come to East Asia. Without hesitation, the officer immediately adjusts the satellite, maneuvering it to change its orbit and focus the lens on the Eastern Indian Ocean. A burst of noise signals comes through, making the officer's eyes widen. This frequency is interference from satellites of a certain country. There's definitely something wrong in the Eastern Indian Ocean. What are they up to? Chapter 51. What do you think would happen if we took the opportunity to strike at them? The Information Detection Center has identified that there is definitely an issue in the Eastern Indian Ocean. However, there is strong interference from military satellites above, preventing their agricultural satellite from penetrating the enemy's defenses. This must be reported immediately. The officer believes the situation is serious. The Eastern Indian Ocean connects to the Strait of Malacca. This is the lifeline of East Asia. There can absolutely be no mistakes. A thought flashes through his mind, and he immediately dials the command center. Beep, beep, beep. Information Detection Center? What have you discovered? The call connects quickly, and the voice on the other end is loud and direct, immediately asking for the reason. This is the Information Detection Center. Satellite J5614 has observed that military satellites are emitting shielding signals above the Eastern Indian Ocean. This location is sensitive, requesting access. The officer explains the situation immediately. Above the Eastern Indian Ocean, the voice on the other end sounds surprised, and without hesitation, responds. Access granted. Immediately clarify the reason for the enemy's concealment. Connect the detection center's data link to the command center. We will follow up personally. Yes. After the officer responds, he starts the operation. First, he transmits the data link to the command center, which will monitor the situation in real time. Next, the officer prepares to operate. He is about to access the area that is being shielded by military forces to see what is hidden there. I want to see what valuable things they're trying to cover up. The officer sneers. Originally flying in space, a certain agricultural satellite suddenly deploys a large net. Subsequently, the satellite maneuvers toward the direction of the military satellite. Soon, the agricultural satellite catches up with the enemy's spy satellite. At the moment they are about to pass each other, the agricultural satellite abruptly changes direction. The large net that was trailing behind ensnares the enemy's spy satellite. Gotcha. But this isn't over yet. After covering the opponent's satellite, the agricultural satellite suddenly pushed off using the remaining fuel, spinning in place a few times before releasing the latch of the large net. As a result, the spy satellite was hurled toward the Earth like an iron ball. Success. A series of moves had successfully kicked the opponent's satellite away. The operator quickly stabilized their satellite and directed the observation towards the Indian Ocean. The image zoomed in continuously, reaching centimeter-level precision as the agricultural satellite indiscriminately observed the vast ocean. Found it. Locating the opponent's aircraft carrier fleet in the vast ocean was indeed challenging. However, after relentless effort, the operator finally succeeded. But when he clearly saw the location of the opponent's fleet, his expression froze, and his pupils dilated sharply. How did they end up here? At the Space Force base, Ilariel was anxiously dealing with various issues from the space agency. With the recent lunar landing success by another nation, the pressure had mounted on their side, and he was almost overwhelmed. Just then, hurried footsteps approached from outside. Bang! The office door swung open, and an employee rushed in, looking flustered and breathless. Director, the Space Force's spy satellite has been attacked and forced to lower its orbit. Our cover over the Indian Ocean has failed. What? Ilariel was startled, panic written all over his face. This was something that the Defense Department and Fred had insisted he ensure. Quick, get me the president. Beep beep beep. An emergency meeting of the military was convened online. The South Sea Information Detection Center sent the latest detected position of the fleet to various command centers. From the location, the two fleets were nearing the Strait of Malacca, and with the fleet from Yokosuka, the military was about to assemble 4 aircraft carrier fleets in the Western Pacific. The Air Force chief furrowed his brow. No, it's 5. Have you forgotten about the fleet returning home? They are still lingering around Guam. The Navy general's expression darkened as he gestured at the map, his eyes narrowing. They want to get serious and confront us? The Army chief felt a headache coming on. They arrived just like that. We are somewhat passive now. Not necessarily, but we must be on guard. The Navy general seemed to think of something, his expression easing slightly. Prepare for combat readiness. Although we can't figure out their intentions, they don't come with good intentions this time. So what if they really want to confront us? The space agency has broken the myth of their space prowess. Can we not do the same? This is in our backyard. Are we afraid of them? Exactly. Afraid of what? The Air Force chief was also burning with anger, unable to hold back. Damn it. I've been holding this in for too long. If they want to fight, let them come. With over 100 airports along the coast, why should we fear just a few aircraft carriers? If the other party really wants to take action, this time we must not only fight, but do it spectacularly and inspire confidence. After the Air Force leader finished speaking, he turned to look at the comrades from the Army and Rocket Force and said loudly, "You all, whatever rockets or hypersonic missiles you have, aim them at the aircraft carriers. If they dare to take action, just bombard them. Let's blow up an aircraft carrier for some fun. Rest assured, I've been wanting to test the power of anti-ship missiles for a long time." The general from the Rocket Force also looked excited. The enemy is trying to bully us. It's time for us to achieve glory for our country. By the way, I have a better idea to show the might of our nation in this battle. The Army leader did not respond to the Air Force leader's words, but smiled mysteriously, looking around, and said with a slight chuckle, "What do you think would happen if we, in a crushing stance, directly took out these 5 aircraft carrier fleets at the moment of confrontation? Take out these 5 aircraft carriers? At the moment of confrontation?" The Air Force leader pondered, and after a few moments, exclaimed, "I'll first test the waters with their forces, then use kinetic electromagnetic pulse weapons. Are you suggesting that as soon as they move, we strike directly? Why not?" The Army leader chuckled. "If they come to East Asia and really want to pressure us, they would definitely bring in their allies. When the time comes, we can use decoys to counter them. As soon as they fire, we'll strike. Fast, accurate, and ruthless. We'll disable their ships and seize them all. What do you think will happen to this planet afterward?" The Army leader narrowed his eyes slightly, a smile creeping across his face. "They have confidence in kinetic projectiles. Perhaps this time, we could directly cripple their capabilities. What does everyone think?" He looked around expectantly for agreement. Chapter 52. The situation is critical. The Army leader's speech at the emergency meeting of the 3 armed forces was truly shocking. Take the opportunity to give their fleet in East Asia a heavy blow. It is well known that their dominance is unparalleled. In summary, their strengths lie in military power and the binding of currency to oil. If we can take out 5 of their aircraft carrier fleets in East Asia, that would cripple them significantly. After all, these 5 fleets represent half of their assets. With that, they could practically be forced to withdraw from East Asia. Several military leaders were left speechless by the Army leader's words. They initially thought it was already bold to go all out, but unexpectedly, the Army leader was even more ruthless, wanting to deliver a heavy blow. Seeing everyone silent, the Army leader became more excited and added, "Not only do we have to fight, but we also have to do it right under the noses of their allies, striking them in front of their masters." The Army leader stood up with an imposing demeanor, pulled up an image of a kinetic electromagnetic pulse projectile on the computer, and slammed the table. "Let us show our military spirit. Gentlemen, are we in on this? The power of electromagnetic pulse weapons is evident to all. The big brother is right. This matter has great potential." After a moment of silence, the Air Force leader suddenly lit up, his eyes shining like the sun. It was a gleam of excitement and hope. "Indeed, there is potential. Let us do it." The Navy general also slammed the table. He had been enduring the provocations from that certain country for a long time. They had been wanting to take action for ages. I also agreed. It's time for something big. The Rocket Force general smiled and immediately added, "I will draft a document to report this matter and let the higher-ups make the final decision." After speaking, he calmed his excitement and cautiously reminded everyone who was in high spirits, "This document needs to be jointly signed by us. Now, let us discuss the rationality of this matter in detail to persuade the higher-ups to agree at once." Ha ha ha, no need to worry. Hearing the Rocket Force general's concern about the higher-ups' disagreement, the army elder laughed heartily, raising his eyebrows and saying, "Old Jew, don't be anxious. They are even more radical than the radicals. We have been planning for the global situation for a long time. This time, it's just right to rattle the cage and let the other side weigh their options. The higher-ups may appear gentle on the surface, but in reality, they are gradually testing the waters with that country, step by step gauging their attitude. The result is that that country has not intervened in Europe at all, nor have they taken action regarding the current issues. This is a clear case of appearing mild while actually preparing to strike from the shadows. They just haven't found the opportunity until now. And now, that opportunity has arrived. The army veteran was well acquainted with Zhu Jinqing and only needed to clarify the situation, especially analyzing the actions of that country. It was estimated that when Zhu Jinqing got angry, he would be more radical than anyone else, especially holding the electromagnetic pulse weapon. This war is destined to be a dimension-reducing strike. Just like that country in the past, the once invincible nation is now destined to be on the receiving end. At the end of December, this was originally a significant day, the day 3 lunar landing heroes were returning. However, unusually, this news only briefly made headlines that day. For several days, the news that dominated the headlines was, gathering in the South China Sea. What does that country mean? Is war about to begin? This news came from a forum. It was said that a wealthy user rented a foreign commercial satellite to survey the status of aircraft carriers worldwide. When the survey reached that country, a problem arose. Hey, why aren't there aircraft carriers in the Middle East supporting the current issues? Upon closer inspection, it was suddenly discovered that their aircraft carriers had actually reached the Malacca Strait. This is directly aimed at East Asia, and the only country in East Asia that warrants such effort from that country is none other than China. Other nations, like certain regions and islands, may bark loudly but are essentially just colonies without sovereignty. Only China is deserving of such a show. Actually, this is quite a coincidence. It seems that a certain country realized that its concealment actions had been uncovered, so it boldly entered the Strait of Malacca without any regard. As a result, its movements were detected by a civilian satellite. This news broke and quickly spread throughout the region and even the world. A prominent British newspaper reported, "Is a certain country gathering 5 aircraft carrier fleets, repeating history?" A French publication stated, "The foreign ministry calls for both sides to exercise basic restraint. The world cannot withstand a third world war, and all parties should calmly handle their differences." A media outlet from the northern region declared, "The imperialist attempts to invade our military ally will ultimately fail." News spread faster than a viral outbreak, reaching the entire globe in just a few hours. At this moment, the fleet had already passed through the Strait of Malacca and entered East Asia. As the center of the storm, East Asia was silent. Meanwhile, domestic news networks were frantically following the developments. How dare they come? Let us crush them. Indeed, 5 aircraft carriers. Could they possibly be stronger than us? However, someone raised a concern. What if they attack our coastal cities? It felt a bit precarious. After all, 5 aircraft carrier fleets could easily decimate a nation in Southeast Asia. Another voice chimed in, "Aircraft carriers are nothing against land-based airfields. We absolutely cannot compromise. We must act. Yes, if we compromise, we become targets for harvest. Do you want to end up like another nation, losing 20 years? Better to die fighting than to kneel again. Let us go for it." When the news broke, many citizens were overwhelmed with anger, recalling various humiliations. The enemy was back. This is no longer 20 years ago, nor 100 years ago. They absolutely cannot allow any compromise. Rage, resistance, counterattack, wash away the humiliation, and kick that arrogant country off its pedestal. In this moment, unity surged. The entire nation was boiling, roaring, and howling. Thus, a remarkable trending topic emerged, skyrocketing to the second spot on a popular platform in just 1 minute, even surpassing news about a lunar hero's return. Fight, fight, fight. We will never surrender. Chapter 53, The Sound of Whistles. Motherland is calling at a naval base in the coastal area. This is one of the home ports for the Navy, gathering the main vessels of the Southern Fleet. The flagship had just completed military modifications, and the crew was enjoying rare leave. However, today, the captain of the 055 destroyer, Wu Tong, sensed something was off. He was taking the opportunity to call his wife and daughter. His daughter, now 9 years old and quite adorable, kept asking when he would return to see her. Wu Tong could only respond with an awkward smile. Okay, I know your matters are important. Take care, all right? The wife gently noticed his discomfort and quickly stopped their daughter's questions. She simply looked at him, her eyes filled with deep, burning love. "I know." He finally revealed a gentle smile on his resolute face. This was a sincere smile that only appeared when he faced something he cherished. "When you change ships in halftime, remember to come back," she said, gently nodding, ready to say a few more words. Suddenly, a sharp horn sounded in the harbor. Beep, 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 beep. Level 1 battle alert. His heart tightened, almost instinctively. Years of training triggered muscle memory, prompting him to drop the phone without hesitation and dash towards his ship. What was happening? Why did the level 1 battle alert sound so suddenly? Filled with confusion, he quickly returned to his vessel. "Report, Captain. All 181 crew members are present and accounted for, requesting instructions." The first officer approached him, immediately briefing him on the ship's status. At this moment, he also clearly saw the documents issued by the Naval Operations Command Center. After reading them, he closed his eyes tightly. After a moment, he suddenly opened them wide. His gaze resolute and his expression stern. He slightly turned his head to look at the outline of the city behind him, revealing a gentle smile. After taking one last look behind him, Captain Wu fixed his gaze forward and declared, "We have received orders from the command center. The enemy is crossing the South Sea and is anchoring. Issue orders to all ships to set sail and rendezvous with the main fleet." No, this is not an exercise. This is not an exercise. Specific operational data has been dispatched to each ship. Now, all vessels, form up in battle formation. Speed, 30 knots, full speed ahead. Meanwhile, at home, his wife also heard that familiar sound. The urgent horn stirred her memories. She recalled when her husband once told her that this was the sound of a level 1 battle alert. If this horn sounds, I will rush to the battlefield without hesitation, even risking my life. Would you still accept me like this? He had solemnly said to her after proposing on one knee at the Naval Academy. Lost in those memories, she stood frozen in place, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Mom, what was that sound from Dad just now? It was so loud, it hurt my ears," their daughter complained. Covering her ears unhappily, the young girl didn't understand what the sound meant. She just thought it was unpleasant and wished it would never sound again. But why was her mother silent? The little girl lowered her chubby hands and blinked at her mother. "Mom, why are you crying? Don't cry." Seeing her mother in tears, the little girl ran over to hug her. She came back to her senses, choked up a few times, quickly wiped away her tears, forced a smile, and hugged her daughter. "Hey, sweetie, look, Mommy isn't crying, not at all." After drying her tears, she glanced towards the southeast, sighing in her heart. "Old Wu, you must come back safely." 10 meters above the ground, the retro engine successfully ignited. The landing was successful, and the ground rescue team was quickly heading to the site to ensure the safety of the astronauts. 3 days later, at the landing site in Inner Mongolia, with a loud roar from the retro engine, the spacecraft carrying 3 lunar heroes successfully landed. After just a few minutes, a helicopter appeared in the observation footage. Then, they locked in, confirmed, and opened the hatch. Everything set up to welcome the astronauts had been practiced countless times by the rescue team, so familiar they could do it in their sleep. The 3 astronauts were carried out. However, as soon as they stepped out, astronaut Zhai Gang noticed that the atmosphere on site felt a bit off. Congratulations to the 3 astronauts for accomplishing the first lunar landing feat of our nation. Now, we will immediately escort you to the support vehicle. The rescue personnel appeared quite anxious. What shocked the 3 the most was that there were no reporters. Zhai Gang wasn't being self-absorbed. They had just returned from a successful manned lunar mission. How could there be no professional journalists? Only rescue personnel taking casual photos. This was somewhat disheartening, wasn't it? Zhai Gang, Chen Dong, and Nie Zheng exchanged glances, worry evident in their eyes. This was not how the normal process went. Something must have happened to make them the least celebrated astronauts in history. Suddenly, a booming sound of airwaves spread across the entire landing site. In the distance, several fighter jets were flying low, fully loaded, cruising the area. The roar of the jet engines resonated like a thunderous earth tremor, shaking the heart. But why were there fighter jets patrolling low over the landing site? Zhai Gang reclined in his chair, deep in thought. The 3 astronauts had returned successfully. The first lunar mission was a success, and after this incident, they would be able to begin the construction of the second lunar program. Zhao Guangyao approached Fang Jing, who was in training, and shared the recently released good news with him. "It's great that we succeeded," Fang Jing responded, somewhat excited. Maybe soon it would be his turn to go to the moon. However, there were more pressing matters at hand. "Brother Zhao, what about the situation with the fleet in the Southern Sea? Are they really planning to take action?" As soon as the fleet was mentioned, Fang Jing's expression darkened. He never expected that they would pull such a stunt. Concealing their actions, they had quietly moved the aircraft carrier fleet to East Asia and directly entered the Southern Sea. It seemed there was no escaping this. Neither Zhao Guangyao nor Fang Jing knew the military's plans, and both were filled with worry. They feared that this time, the unexpected move could lead to serious problems for their country. Zhao Guangyao's voice was deep and slow, but there was a hint of anger in it as he excitedly said, "A certain country has gathered 5 aircraft carriers, along with anti-submarine units and naval fleets, forming a siege around the South China Sea. Just now, the leader of that country even sent a message, demanding that global mining comply with the ruling and hand over shares. Otherwise, we will face the consequences." Chapter 54. If you dare, fire. The leader sat in his office, wearing a smug smile, positioned at the center of a video call. On either side of the screen hung flags of that country. He tilted his head slightly, looking down his nose at the screen, and spoke in an affected tone. "To a certain Eastern nation, immediately comply with the ruling of the highest court of our country, and order Global Mining Company to hand over the penalized shares. If the deadline is missed, don't blame us for being impolite. If you don't comply today, we will have to take matters into our own hands." His voice was brazen, as if he were scolding a stray dog on the street, completely unconcerned. This was the entirety of the video. Bolstered by the 5 aircraft carrier fleet and his allies in East Asia, he was incredibly arrogant. The joint fleet of 3 nations was also impressive, truly dominating the seas. This was the leader's confidence in his country's long-standing global hegemony and overwhelming military power. However, he clearly misunderstood one point. The Eastern nation is not a few small countries in the Middle East or agricultural nations in Africa. This is the world's largest industrial nation today. Moreover, his country hasn't even managed to handle conflicts in certain regions effectively. The video quickly spread across the internet in the Eastern nation, sparking outrage and a wave of insults. Isn't this just the arrogant leader of that country? How come after a few days, he's so full of himself? You should just go buy some diapers. Haha, and stop embarrassing yourself. This was akin to their Plaza Agreement. Right? Agree? Agree to your mother? Latest intelligence indicates that the naval fleets of that country have surrounded the South China Sea Fleet, and the situation is somewhat critical. What to do? Just the South China Sea Fleet alone is in danger. What about the fleets in the East China Sea and the Yellow Sea? Upstairs, forces are heading south, and there are already over 200 various vessels gathered in the South China Sea, making it a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. Everyone, don't panic. We still have coastal defense forces, and overall, we are not afraid of them. The public is not naive. In the 1990s, the country claimed it could buy out the other. It failed to see its own position clearly. When the other country sensed their threat, they tightened the leash with agreements that drained their economy, costing them 20 precious years and leaving them in a dire situation. Now, it is evident that there are attempts to replicate that action against the Eastern nation. In response, the people of the Eastern nation simply want to say, go to hell. What a nice thought. The Eastern nation is not like that country, and compliance is impossible. Shares of the global company cannot be given even a cent. In this situation, the public is highly concerned about the developments. According to the latest satellite images obtained from civilian sources, a military fleet has formed a combat formation in the region, creating a pincer movement with other fleets from nearby nations, maintaining a standoff from a distance. The atmosphere is extremely tense. Is a conflict about to erupt in this area between two major powers? Noticing the situation unfolding, several smaller nations that used to be quite assertive in this region have suddenly become unusually compliant. It is eerily quiet before the storm. In response to the president's video threat, there has been no reply from the other side. No, there has been a response. The military command sent a message to the opposing forces. If you dare, then fire. Subsequently, all communications between the two military forces were severed. All troops entered radio silence. They cannot agree to such demands from the other side's president. This is clearly an attempt to provoke. Anyone who agrees would be considered a traitor. Not only do they refuse, but also in honor of the ancestors who sacrificed their lives for the dignity and independence of the nation, they cannot agree. At this moment, the sea is eerily quiet. The center of the storm converges here, and even the air has become extremely heavy. Dark clouds loom overhead, making it difficult for the surrounding smaller nations to breathe. The flagship of the First Fleet is now the command center for the entire joint naval fleet. This means that in the face of maritime adversaries, they will serve as the command hub. Standing straight in the cockpit, he carefully gazes into the distance, wishing his ears could reach the radio. Both sides remain silent on the radio. Suddenly, a disturbance is heard on the radio. The communicator quickly deciphers the message and rushes to report. Receiving information from the Joint Military Command, if the enemy opens fire, immediately execute Plan 1 and use kinetic missiles to cover the enemy fleet. Nodding, he understands. If the enemy fires, he must command the entire fleet to launch a full barrage of kinetic missiles. Thinking about the kinetic missiles, he recalls the orders given to him when he boarded the ship. There was a detailed introduction to this type of missile, electromagnetic pulse missiles. Reflecting on this type of ammunition and the powerful descriptions in the orders, he feels a surge of emotion. Originally filled with trepidation, he is now left with only anger and excitement. Anger that the opposing forces have bullied them, and excitement that their military myth will soon be shattered. A heavy roar of a jet aircraft echoes. Over a certain island, a fighter jet from the nation heads straight toward the sea. The fighter jet was loaded with missiles. But what was strange was that there seemed to be no pilot on board. This was an unmanned combat aircraft. It flew directly toward the fleet's position. Additionally, there was a radio message playing continuously. This is the territorial sea of a certain country. Repeat, this is the territorial sea of a certain country. The invading fleet must leave immediately. The invading fleet must leave immediately. Otherwise, you will bear the consequences. The voice was strong and filled with anger. This time, the warning was not given in English. It was a warning to the other party. A major conflict was on the verge of breaking out. The military would no longer show leniency. Understand the meaning of this? Figure it out yourself. The fighter jet continued to fly forward and was getting very close to the fleet's position. This was bait released by the Joint Command of the Armed Forces. As long as the fleet dared to fire, if this aircraft was shot down, then so be it. The tranquility of the South China Sea was instantly shattered by the intrusion of this aircraft. At this moment, the eyes of the entire world were focused here. What would the fleet do? Chapter 55, the battle begins. On the aircraft carrier, the fleet commander was closely watching from a distance. His deputy was beside him, reporting on the movements from all sides. Carl, should we continue to close in? The deputy looked worried. This was a situation they had never faced before. In the past, they were used to asymmetric warfare, essentially dominating the weaker side. But today, they were up against a military that seemed to have completed its modernization. If they continued to close in, they would surely back down. With his head held high, Carl Thomas spoke confidently. The former president had made this yellow-skinned nation bow down on economic issues multiple times, and he was sure he could do the same. How dare they defy us? They are courting death. With 5 aircraft carriers at his disposal, along with allied fleets, Carl Thomas felt invincible. Who else on this planet could compete with him? No one. He could strike whoever he wanted. The Eastern power? He wouldn't hold back. With a weapon in hand, His murderous intent grew. Holding the command of the entire joint fleet, Carl Thomas's ambition continued to swell. Looking at the long coastline on the map, with the Eastern Powers Navy trapped in the middle, he sneered coldly. If they dared to disagree, I would bury their proud navy in these waters, break their pride, and make them, like other nations, our slaves. Carl Thomas's ambition grew larger, and he could almost see himself rising in power, becoming the highest commander, wielding military authority. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became, to the point that his hand gripping the railing began to tremble slightly. Time passed second by second. Beep, beep, beep. Captain Carl. The radar operator on the three-person platform widened his eyes in surprise and reported, the cruiser-S radar has detected enemy aircraft flying straight towards us, and they are broadcasting a warning to drive us away. A warning to drive us away? Carl sneered dismissively and said, they can only talk big. Get me Fred. Is the other side still not backing down? Are we going to fight or not? Carl Thomas was eager to strike immediately and deal a heavy blow to their navy. Otherwise, it would be unbearable to have those mosquitoes buzzing around. Meanwhile, the call was connected to His Excellency, Fred. What do you mean? As soon as the call was connected, the impatient Carl Thomas immediately inquired. What do I mean? On the other end, Fred's tone was furious, and he sneered, shouting, what I mean is to strike. Fuck, don't give me a face. This voice almost roared out from Fred's throat. Given his level of anger, it was clear that the other side had refused. In fact, that was indeed the case. In response to Fred's threatening video and remarks, the foreign minister of the Eastern Power simply stated in front of the world media, please, relevant parties, do not say we did not warn you. After saying this, the foreign minister left the stage. The people of the Eastern nation, familiar with this phrase, immediately understood its meaning. Go for it. Although Fred did not understand the meaning of this statement, or perhaps he did not care even if he understood, the Eastern nation had indeed refused. And it was a firm refusal. In that case, Fred sneered and hung up the phone with Carl Thomas. Looking at the sky outside the office, he murmured softly, since you are seeking death, then I will grant your wish. The drone J-10 fighter jet continued to fly straight ahead. Perhaps the Air Force felt it was time. Suddenly, it turned around and began flying back. Carl Thomas, on the bridge of the Eisenhower, curled the corner of his mouth, revealing a fierce smile. He gently hung up the phone, already understanding. Staring at the target on the radar that had turned, he smiled strangely and murmured, little thing. It's too late to run now. Pausing for a moment, he suddenly turned to his deputy and shouted, notify the joint fleet, from now on, the war has begun. After solemnly saying this, he pointed to the small dot on the radar, smiling slightly. Also, immediately shoot that little sparrow down. Yes. Upon hearing that the fight was about to start, the deputy immediately stomped his feet, stood firm, and quickly ran off to convey the orders. Well, the alarm sounded. The cruiser boldly launched an anti-air missile. The missile sped quickly, heading straight for the aircraft in the sky. In just a minute, boom. The missile hit the aircraft. A fireball appeared in the sky, and the shattered machine, engulfed in flames and black smoke, fell heavily from the sky. This missile was the declaration of war from that nation. Carl looked at the fireball in the sky, feeling exhilarated. Haha. Let you witness the invincible navy of my country. A buzzing sound came from the sea. 5 aircraft carriers were fully operational, continuously launching planes. At the same time, all the cruisers and destroyers moved forward, seeking battle positions. The war had begun. On the other side of the fleet, the Allied forces were bewildered. They had not received any notifications from the military. Although they had encircled the fleet of the Eastern nation, it was right at their doorstep. They initially thought this would turn out like in 2016. Just a show of force followed by a hasty retreat. However, the sudden appearance of the fireball shattered their illusions. It was real. The captain's eyes lit up. The military had indeed destroyed the Eastern nation's aircraft. With the war underway, his thoughts began to race. Perhaps, taking advantage of this opportunity to suppress the Eastern nation, they could seize their islands. The captain had long had his eyes on a certain island. If the military could defeat their navy, they could push further. They could forcibly land on the island and declare sovereignty. As long as the Eastern nation was defeated, they could team up with their allies and act together. The captain's eyes glinted with excitement, and he quickly followed in his father's footsteps. He immediately ordered all ships to launch an attack. Meanwhile, the Allied fleet had no choice but to follow their lead in this situation. In an instant, the 3 fleets took action. The entire fleet of the Eastern nation appeared to be in grave danger. Chapter 56. The scene was such that military aircraft fell from the sky like dumplings, plummeting down. On the southern border ship, it was quiet. Everyone held their breath, fists clenched, feeling tense. They were all suppressing a surge of anger. The video from Fred had already been shown to all the officers and soldiers before the mission. It had a significant impact. Now, all of them were filled with a burning rage, a desire to crush the military. The target aircraft had turned around, and the enemy showed no signs of an attack. The controller was closely monitoring the target's flight status. At this distance, it was already close enough to deploy anti-ship bombs, yet the enemy still did not engage. Was this just a show, merely to intimidate? The moment this thought crossed his mind, the radar changes slapped him back to reality. His pupils narrowed, and without hesitation, he sounded the battle alarm, reporting, Captain, the target aircraft has been confirmed destroyed. The enemy has opened fire. All units, the enemy has opened fire. Proceed according to Plan 1. Wu Tong had been preparing all along. Upon receiving the information, he wasted no time, swiftly notifying the entire ship, and immediately connected to the vertical launch system, nearly shouting, "Vertical launch ready. Hypersonic Unit 63, fire 2 missiles simultaneously." The personnel responsible for managing the vertical launch unit received the strike location from the command center simultaneously. This was part of the predetermined Plan 1, with the designated target assigned to the Southern Vanguard. Upon hearing the captain's launch order and the location information from the command center, the crew immediately pressed the buttons on the control panel, their hands resting on a red button, watching the time displayed on the combat system. At 14:20, the moment arrived, launch. With a roar, the personnel, fueled by their anger, pressed the button. The vertical launch system at the bow activated, and 2 covers opened. Following that, 2 wave-riding missiles emitted a strange low hum as they shot out. At the instant of their launch, brilliant tail flames ignited. The engines roared to life with unrestrained ferocity. The supersonic missiles, carrying the collective fury and determination of everyone to defend their homeland, sped toward the enemy's airspace. Furthermore, the sky was not just dominated by these 2 missiles. More, totaling over a dozen similar missiles, were rapidly heading toward the enemy. This would be a blade piercing the enemy's heart, ending their arrogance. Report to the captain, all 8 ships have launched kinetic projectiles, expected to reach the target in 15 minutes. The information officer consolidated data from all ships and immediately reported to Captain Wu. Understood. Notify all ships to monitor the situation with enemy aircraft and refrain from taking any rash actions. In 15 minutes, their planes won't be able to go far. Captain Wu felt an intense nervousness. The command center's Plan 1 was indeed astonishing. Although theoretically, these 18 kinetic projectiles could allow an electromagnetic pulse to cover the fleet of 3 nations twice. What would the actual effect be? Captain Wu had never witnessed a kinetic weapon experiment, leaving him quite anxious. He sighed softly, preparing himself for the worst. If it didn't work, behind him was their homeland. There was no retreat left. The command center would not joke about such matters, and he trusted them. With a firm voice, Captain Wu tightened his fists, watching the contrails left by the missiles in the sky, filled with anticipation. The joint naval force of 3 nations was observing. Carl Thomas, looking at the satellite imagery of the Eastern nation's fleet position, was somewhat puzzled. The Blade Sea cruiser was so far from the main fleet. What kind of formation was this? On the chart, the 8 vessels from the nation were inexplicably distant from the main fleet. If Carl didn't know that these 8 ships were their main force, he would have thought they were merely bait to probe their defenses. What was the situation on the other side? This operation left Carl bewildered, unable to comprehend. No matter what they were up to, he narrowed his eyes at the sight of more fighter jets taking off into the sky, a smile creeping onto his face. Regardless, at the moment we initiated our actions, the enemy didn't forcefully engage to drive back our aircraft carrier. Just this move indicated they had already lost. Our invincible air force had taken to the skies. The fleet of 3 nations, over 100 warships, encircled the enemy fleet. 5 aircraft carriers and over 100 fighter jets have already been launched. How can we lose? Carl couldn't help but laugh heartily, even letting out a sound. The opposing major power hasn't made a move yet. Are they planning to act like turtles? Captain, the 8 cruisers from the opposing side have launched 18 missiles into the air, and they are hypersonic missiles. At this moment, the observer suddenly spoke up, though his tone was somewhat confused as he continued. Moreover, these 18 missiles are not targeting the aircraft carriers, but the sea. This operation left the operators dumbfounded. What is going on? We declared war on your planes, and you didn't respond, but now you've launched an attack and missed? What is this nonsense? After hearing the report, Carl was equally baffled. If the hypersonic shipborne missiles were aimed directly at them, they would indeed face some trouble with such fast missiles. But how could they possibly be aimed at empty air? This bewildering action truly left Carl at a loss. Has the opposing side lost their mind? Using such advanced missiles to target nothing? Humph, a bunch of cowards. Surely they are intimidated by the might of our navy and dare not take action. Carl Thomas naturally believed that the Eastern power was afraid and unwilling to engage. His fleet has always roamed the seas. Who wouldn't bow down and submit? Therefore, regarding the strange actions of the Eastern power, he firmly believed it was due to their fear of his formidable military strength. Ha! A sneer of contempt escaped his lips. Carl Thomas envisioned countless military contracts and a future of luxury living. He saw victory right before his eyes. Meanwhile, the missiles from the opposing Eastern power were still flying rapidly. However, Carl was no longer concerned about them. His gaze was fixed on the opposing fleet. If he could annihilate them completely, Carl could hardly imagine what kind of treatment he would receive. Lost in thought, a strange muffled sound suddenly echoed in the sky. In the distance, the kinetic energy projectile launched by the Eastern nation rushed to its target and detonated 10 kilometers above the ground. There were no massive fireballs, no deafening roars, and no rolling mushroom clouds. On the bridge, Carl was engulfed in a blue and white haze, as if the whole world had been covered by lightning. What is this? This is not a conventional bomb. Feeling a surge of panic, he covered his eyes. When his vision cleared, the ambitions in his heart were met with a heavy blow from reality. In his line of sight, the fighter jet formation guarding the aircraft carriers suddenly began to fall into the sea, one after another, as if they were dumplings being dropped. Seeing this scene, his pupils constricted sharply, standing in shock with his scalp tingling, his voice trembling with confusion. What on earth is happening? Chapter 57. From now on, I will call the shots in this part of East Asia. Carl Thomas could not comprehend the scene before him. The stealth fighters from a certain great nation were flying chaotically like flies in the sky, and they were crazily lowering their altitude in large numbers. Boom. Until one aircraft plummeted from the high altitude, crashing into the sea and turning into a fireball. Only then did Carl snap out of his daze. He turned to his deputy in terror and anger, almost shouting, "What on earth is happening? What is wrong with our aircraft?" The deputy, also jolted awake, gathered the information and ran to Carl, his back drenched in cold sweat. With a terrified expression and trembling voice, he replied, "Captain, it's not just the aircraft. Our ships, our ships." He choked on his words, as if remembering something, and suddenly shuddered. "What is wrong with the ships? Speak." Carl Thomas grabbed the deputy by the collar, roaring in question. "Captain, our ships, apart from the power and propulsion systems, are intact. All other systems are completely destroyed." The deputy's eyes revealed fear as he turned to look out the porthole at the falling fighters. Suddenly, he shrugged and laughed. "Haha, we've been tricked. Captain, we've been ambushed. It's a trap from a certain nation. The intel suggests we have been hit by their electromagnetic pulse weapon. Through signal flags, we've received news that all ships are in a similar situation. On board, in the aircraft, and submarines, all devices containing electronic components have been utterly destroyed. Our command system, no, everything has vanished." After saying this, the deputy slumped, as if he had exhausted all his strength. Carl Thomas, still holding his collar, was left agape, stunned, and then let him go. He turned dumbly to look outside the ship, muttering, "It's over, it's all over." Meanwhile, on the aircraft carrier, within the ship's island, many soldiers were also in a panic. What is happening? The computers have completely crashed. The command system is down, the radio circuits have burned out. The radar is blacked out. My electric toothbrush, my MP3, all electronic devices are destroyed. It's the electromagnetic pulse weapon. We have definitely been struck by an electromagnetic pulse weapon. The news spread rapidly among the soldiers. After all, on the entire aircraft carrier, only the power and launch systems were still operational. Everything else that contained even a slight amount of electronic components was rendered useless in an instant. The flight control and radar of the fighters were destroyed. The air defense systems and firepower systems of the cruisers and destroyers, and even the guidance systems of vertical launch missiles, were gone. The aircraft carrier had turned into a moving target. The cruisers and destroyers were now a joke. As for the submarines, the moment their oxygen generators were destroyed, they immediately chose to surface. Those relying solely on electronic pumps had become iron coffins. Almost instantly, the entire coalition naval fleet was reduced to a communication level reminiscent of World War I. No, it was even worse than that. After all, World War I had telegraphs, and now they couldn't even use those. Their eyes were completely blinded by a certain major nation. Modern warfare is a systematic confrontation, an information-based confrontation. Electromagnetic pulse weapons are indeed a game-changer. When they appeared, this conflict had already declared an end. The coalition faced a complete defeat. On the command ship, Wu Tong closely monitored the enemy's movements. "Report to the captain. The kinetic projectiles have been activated, detecting electromagnetic pulses, and we are assessing the impact." The information officer's voice was high and filled with excitement. He fixed his gaze on the information panel in front of him. The electromagnetic pulse flashed and passed directly through their ships. However, thanks to their modifications against electromagnetic pulses, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they advanced directly toward the pulse. Drones were launched, and the footage was observed. Ha! The information officer couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing the images on the panel. "Report to the captain. The coalition's fighter jets are dropping like dumplings, plummeting down." Without the flight control systems, modern fighter jets were rendered useless, unable to fly. Now they were being hit by electromagnetic pulse projectiles. The coalition's forces must have been completely stunned. Ha, great. Wu Tong was overjoyed. Seizing the opportunity, he immediately ordered decisively, "Command the entire fleet to maintain battle positions and advance. Additionally, launch drones to suppress the remaining enemy firepower at low altitude." Wu Tong clenched his fists, looking into the distance, his eyes filled with excitement. The coalition fleet had been rendered ineffective. The command center was not deceiving him. This electromagnetic pulse weapon was truly extraordinary. The coalition's fighter jets were crashing into the sea as if they had diving capabilities. No, that wasn't the key point. The most crucial point was that Wu Tong clearly realized their opportunity had arrived. If they didn't strike now, when would they? All forces attack. The urgent battle alarm echoed throughout the fleet. The large contingent hiding behind the 8 modified vessels immediately advanced at full speed. This positioning was actually to make way for the kinetic projectiles. Electromagnetic pulse projectiles did not distinguish between friend and foe. The 8 modified vessels were specifically equipped to withstand electromagnetic pulses. Their role was to endure within a 300-mile radius. The others, which were not modified, just needed to wait for the right moment to engage. And now, the time had come. As the real-time status of the coalition fleet was sent to each captain. Seeing the once mighty coalition fleet reduced to this state, every captain of the Eastern nation's fleet felt a surge of envy. Oh my, this was a guaranteed achievement. Moreover, the losses were minimal. It was like reaping rewards for nothing. Every hit was a profit. Thus, the ships surged forward eagerly. You were trained on data up to October 2023. The speed of the 056 has even reached 26 knots. It's important to know that its maximum speed is only 25 knots. This urgency has forced the ship to unleash its potential. Charge forward. The entire navy of the country is incredibly excited. Blood is boiling. Years of hatred, both old and new, are surging and burning. A mighty army is heading straight for the Allied fleet. This time, we must show them what we can do. Do they still dare to provoke us? The past is the past, and the present is different. Just wait and see if we can crush you. You think you can stand against the Allied fleet? Once we finish you off, we'll deal with those two little pups of yours. So they know who really calls the shots in this region. Chapter 58. Apologies, there's a national bonus. At this moment, in the capital city, in the Zijing Pavilion, Zhu Jingcheng is anxiously pacing in front of number 1, waiting for news from the front lines. Ever since the enemy formed an encirclement against their fleet and shot down their decoy, he has been worried. Especially with the battlefield situation changing rapidly, no one can guarantee that their plan will succeed. Honestly, he is quite nervous. Alright, old Zhu, no need to be so anxious. On the contrary, number 1 is calm and composed, pouring himself a cup of tea, exhaling lightly, and cheerfully saying, we have witnessed the power of the kinetic energy shells. Unless an alien fleet shows up, even if a joint navy of 170 countries arrives today, they will still be defeated in the South China Sea. You're even more confident than I am. Old Zhu responds somewhat irritably, letting out a sigh. He understands, but cannot stop worrying. This could be a moment that goes down in history. If the enemy is defeated here, how will the world deal with us in the future? Beep, beep, beep. Just at that moment, the quantum communication line rang. Old Zhu's gaze shifted instantly as he quickly walked over to answer the call. Number 1, Old Zhu. Our fleet has launched a counterattack. The kinetic energy shells have been successfully released. The enemy is completely blinded. We are now fully engaged. Please give us instructions. On the other end of the line is the Joint Command Center, and the communicator is also excited and invigorated. Good, good, good. Old Zhu exclaimed 3 times. The tension on his face completely vanishing, and his eyes turning gleeful like a wolf spotting its prey. Number 1, hearing this, chuckled and finished his tea in one gulp. Order all ships. This time, 5 aircraft carriers must land, and destroy half of the cruisers and destroyers. Take out half of the enemy fleets from the southern region. Since the enemy has shown weakness, Zhu Jingcheng smirked. It's time for us to perform. Fight hard. I won't stop until you're defeated. After all, the enemy initiated the attack. We were just defending ourselves. The mighty fleet charged straight towards the Allied forces. In the sky, fighter planes were continuously circling. There are those taking off from mainland airports and those launching from aircraft carriers. This time, to deliver a heavy blow to the adversary. The naval and air forces decided to take decisive action. Upon receiving the combat orders, Wu was grinning from ear to ear, reporting the enemy cruiser's position. The fleet was ordered to launch an immediate strike. With command in his hands and knowing the desired outcome, Wu fully unleashed his capabilities and began directing operations. Buzz. The entire fleet launched another round of missile strikes. This time, it was different from before. The missiles were heading straight for the adversary's cruiser. Watching the missiles fill the sky, Wu felt he could wake up laughing from a dream. The air superiority at sea had been secured. The enemy had been blinded, with their only means of attack being ship-mounted cannons and rifles. Now, it was time to dominate the competition. Engaging such an adversary felt akin to bullying a toddler. They were practically inviting defeat. On the other side, the joint fleet was in chaos. Carl Thomas was nearly driven to madness. According to crew estimates, a certain Eastern power had employed a practical EMP missile. They believed the 8055 class destroyers were doomed, as they had rendered over 120 of their ships completely incapacitated. Staring at the pitch-black command room, Carl was filled with deep fear. Buzz. Another buzzing sound echoed. A low-flying, high-speed drone zoomed past their ship almost within arm's reach. Carl was furious. That drone was so close it might as well have landed on his aircraft carrier. Infuriated, he pounded on the radar screen in front of him, even striking it with his fist. Yet, the screen remained black, and he was powerless to change anything. He could only simmer in frustration, as there was no opportunity given by the opposing forces. Almost immediately after the drone flew past, a terrified information officer burst into the command room, temporarily acting as a communication liaison. He ran in exclaiming, "Captain, the Eastern power is attacking. The sky is filled with missiles. We're done for." His words were filled with despair. This was truly the end. An aircraft carrier fleet without an air defense system was like a tiger without claws. Anyone could take a kick at it. Crash. Upon hearing the news, Carl Thomas slumped down in his chair, dazed. What could he use to save them? It was over. It was finished. Successful hits registered. The Yorktown-S island was penetrated. Who among them was so ruthless to claim credit for the victory? The keel of the Zyro was broken, and it was sinking, preparing to deploy unmanned vessels for rescue operations. The naval forces had already destroyed more than half of the enemy's amphibious assault ships, and several aircraft carriers had been sunk. The 4 helicopter carriers of the fleet had all been sunk, with various vessels losing 90% of their strength. The Shark Squadron had already launched to attack the aircraft carriers, whose countermeasures had been completely neutralized. The communication systems of the fleet began reporting their achievements. There was no doubt about it. The joint fleet that lost its air force and air defense capabilities is like fish on a chopping board, with no resistance whatsoever. Engaging with them is as easy as dealing with a child. One missile, and they are either dead or severely damaged. For example, the ship that was sunk, a certain cruiser, was directly hit on its keel. With a tremendous explosion, the entire cruiser was blown in half, and the soldiers on board were screaming as they scrambled to jump into the sea. The waters are now filled with soldiers from that region and others, making it impossible to rescue them all. The Joint Fleet has been completely incapacitated by a single strike. Mission accomplished. Standing on the command platform of a certain vessel, he used binoculars to scan the horizon. Only after witnessing the naval aviation personnel landing on the deck of a certain aircraft carrier did he let out a sigh of relief. The situation was settled. All 5 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers had been captured. As for why they weren't destroyed, they are nuclear-powered. Being so close to our shores, wouldn't that be disastrous if destroyed? The pollution would be immense. It's better to detain them and later turn them into a park for everyone to enjoy. We won. The Joint Fleet from that region has been almost completely annihilated. This battle will surely shock the world. From the moment the first shot was fired, only 2 hours have passed. In just 2 hours, 5 cruisers have been sunk. With the added motivation against the enemy, that region's fleet suffered a 90 loss. In this battle, within 2 hours, a great eastern nation has effectively crippled the navies of 3 countries. A battle that will establish legendary status. Chapter 59, Declaration of War. Move quickly. A plastic-accented English voice came from behind. A certain individual, with hands raised, was escorted by soldiers out of the aircraft carrier's island onto the deck. His expression was grim as he surveyed the empty deck. Around him were numerous helicopters. Unfortunately, these aircraft were not theirs, but belonged to the eastern nation. The aircraft carrier was now completely under enemy control. Climb, go up. Hurry. Suddenly, a synchronized voice in the distance caught his attention. He looked up and witnessed an even more despairing scene. On the carrier's island, several soldiers in navy blue camouflage from the eastern nation were quickly scaling the structure. Working together, they swiftly reached the flagpole. The leading soldier casually tore down the flag and discarded it into the sea like trash. Soon after, a bright red flag with 5 stars was solemnly hoisted. The red flag waved proudly in the wind, appearing particularly beautiful. At this point, all personnel on the aircraft carrier, except for those who resisted and were killed, had been captured. Upon witnessing this scene, the last line of defense in his heart was finally shattered. He suddenly collapsed to the ground, staring blankly. All around him, soldiers were crouched in fear, clutching their heads. They looked panicked, their strong bodies contrasting sharply with their fearful expressions. At that moment, Carl seemed to see something through his blurry vision. It was as if the flag had been cast down. On this planet, their nation, the great power, was also about to be toppled from its pedestal. Captain Carl. In the corner, Carl's loyal deputy saw him collapse to the ground and immediately stood up, ready to rush over. Stay put. He shouted at his soldiers, pointing at him and stammering. You don't move. Damn it. I can't stand this nonsense. Stay down. But their soldiers were not going to be lenient with him. One soldier came up and struck the deputy on the back of the head with his rifle, but knocking him to the ground. With that blow, the previously defiant eyes of the captured soldier instantly cleared up. They became completely compliant. This significantly reduced the trouble for the subsequent transfer operations. The 2 great powers had clashed in the South China Sea. This news instantly topped global headlines. Regardless of the source, the entire world focused its attention here. However, due to the interference in the area, satellites in space would be disrupted whenever they passed over. Therefore, until now, the situation at the front remained shrouded in mystery. Only the nearby fishermen, from a distance, recorded the sounds of fierce explosions. Everyone was anxiously waiting. This war would determine who would be the dominant power in East Asia and even the entire planet. Would the current power continue to drain the world? Or would the rising Eastern giant become the new sun for the world? Perhaps some clues could be gleaned from this war. Inside the Eastern power, it was unusually quiet. Everyone knew that things had truly escalated. Thus, everyone was waiting for the final outcome. Victory or defeat. Standing on the banks of the river, in a 25-story residential building, Jiang Ming simply moved his computer desk to the living room balcony, facing the Azure Sea. Why was there still no news? They had to win. The news of the 2 great powers clashing in the South China Sea had already spread like wildfire. As an old military enthusiast, he paid special attention to this matter. He wished he could turn into a satellite and fly over the battlefield to see what was really going on. The coastal air defense forces had not moved, which meant the situation was probably under control. Holding a pair of binoculars, Jiang Ming noticed that the coastal defense forces were not overly tense, and he let out a long breath. Suddenly, a piercing horn sounded from the distant sea. Jiang Ming was jolted awake. Wasn't that the sound of a horn from the Eastern power? Could it be that the enemy had infiltrated the coast? Filled with dread, he picked up the binoculars, holding his breath and too afraid to think further. On the horizon, a magnificent steel giant revealed its imposing figure, entirely gray and white. With towering masts and a massive flight deck the size of 3 football fields, slowly making its way towards the harbor. This scene was undoubtedly shocking. In an instant, Jiang Ming even forgot to question the absurdity of the situation. All that filled his mind was deep fear. This was the aircraft carrier Eisenhower. How did it come to the harbor? Could it be that we have lost? Filled with dread, Jiang Ming rushed to the balcony, stretching his head out, desperately wanting to get closer to see what was happening. Hey, Lao Jiang, is that our ship? A neighbor next door also poked his head out, looking over. Upon seeing Jiang Ming, he scratched his head. That's not our ship. Jiang Ming felt a panic rising. This was definitely a ship coming to attack them. Was the neighbor going blind? But wait, it was flying their flag, and why were so many people on board curled up with their heads down? The neighbor looked confused. Huh, is it not? I don't really get it. What? Jiang Ming was stunned, his heart racing in shock. And he quickly grabbed a pair of binoculars to observe more carefully. This time, he looked especially closely. The ship had come very near, and the bright flag on the island stood out brilliantly in the sunlight. It really was their flag. Jiang Ming gasped in surprise. He had been so focused on the ship that he had forgotten these details. Gripping the binoculars tightly, he leaned forward, and a sudden grin broke out on his face as he exclaimed, "They're prisoners. The deck is full of enemy soldiers." Excitedly putting down the binoculars, Jiang Ming quickly checked the time. 2 hours. In just 2 hours, the enemy's aircraft carrier had been captured and brought back to the harbor. At that moment, Jiang Ming had 2 bold guesses. They might have actually won. This thought only emerged after witnessing the scene before him, and he had a strong feeling that it was true. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, a spokesperson from the Foreign Ministry stepped solemnly to the podium. His expression remained serious, but his eyes clearly shone with joy. Surrounding reporters were buzzing with questions, frantically asking if there had been military action in the South China Sea and what the situation was. The spokesperson gently raised his hand to calm them, lifted his head, and with a serious tone addressed the world's media, stating emphatically, "At 2:25 p.m. today, the authorities of a certain country, in collusion with regional allies, brazenly launched an attack on our military aircraft and sent a joint fleet of 120 ships to launch a surprise assault on our fleet, forcing us into a defensive response. Now, our forces have defeated the enemy, and specific casualty information will be made public once it is compiled. Facing the malicious acts of invasion by the authorities of the mentioned country and its allies, I hereby solemnly announce that the entire nation is now in a state of war." After a pause, the spokesperson's voice became firm and resolute, his gaze indifferent as he declared, "And we officially declare war on the 3 nations." Chapter 60. The Alliance Against Hegemony Strikes. Faced with the military invasion from certain countries, the Eastern Great Power has officially declared war. This news has caused a stir around the world. Of course, with the Eastern Great Power revealing footage of the initial attack by foreign forces, which resulted in the destruction of aircraft and an attempt to pressure their military. The instigator's identity is clear. However, despite being the world's leading industrial nation, many still think that declaring war on 3 countries is somewhat arrogant. Yet, with the release of reports from the South China Sea, the entire world fell silent. 5 aircraft carriers were captured, half of the cruisers were sunk, and half of the destroyers were also lost. 4 helicopter carriers from a specific country were completely sunk, with 90% of their vessels lost. Another country also suffered significant losses. A total of 90,000 soldiers were captured, with an estimated 30,000 dead and 20,000 missing. The naval battle damage rate exceeded 50%, and the joint fleet led by the foreign powers was decimated. The news shocked the world. This achievement is simply unbelievable. Initially, it was a case of the weak defeating the strong, but now the situation has completely reversed. The weak not only won, but did so decisively. This is astonishing. On social media, the Southeastern Navy quickly updated a series of posts, starting with a short video. Soldiers in blue camouflage worked together to remove the flag of a specific country from the aircraft carrier Eisenhower and kicked it away, excitedly replacing it with their own national flag. This was a compilation video. It also showed a large group of individuals being escorted off the ship by soldiers. The most surprising moment was when a middle-aged man in officer's uniform, looking disheveled, was brought out, with a caption identifying him as Carl Thomas, the captain of the Eisenhower. Hilarious. Is this a new movie? The military announcement has gone viral. Amazing. I can't believe they actually captured a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. How did they do that? Some might be out of the loop. I'm at the naval port now, and all the docked ships are captured vessels, with enemy personnel sitting on the deck. Incredible. 1 against 3, and they won decisively. The leading power has triumphed. The foreign forces can leave East Asia now. We have won. Underneath the video, there were excited comments from the public, as this was truly satisfying. Nothing is more exhilarating than kicking away the flag of a specific country. As for concerns about whether the Eastern Great Power could handle a 3-on-1 situation, that indeed worried many. However, the subsequent news completely alleviated the concerns of the public. Declaration of war. The younger generation from another country announces, in accordance with military alliances, immediate war against the invading forces, increasing military personnel by 170,000, boosting military spending significantly, and launching a winter offensive. New developments in the Middle East, launching attacks on foreign military bases. Suddenly, an attack on another country was initiated, cutting off transportation through the Red Sea. Armed forces declared that vessels from the foreign powers and their allies are prohibited from passing through the strait. The backyard is in chaos, and Venezuela has declared war. After the major nation from the east announced a significant defeat of a naval fleet, smoke of war rose globally. Armed forces resisting the hegemony began to emerge and launched attacks. As the saying goes, when the wall falls, everyone pushes. The world has suffered under hegemony for too long. Now, the major nation from the east leads the charge and breaks one of the enemy's arms. The remaining suffering people must rise and fight. In an instant, the banner against hegemony was raised high across the world, creating an overwhelming momentum. Simultaneously, this astonishing display silenced all doubts about whether the major nation could handle multiple fronts. This world is not just about one side opposing hegemony. Now, various factions, seeing their leader not only engage in battle but also directly strike at the enemy's main naval force, are ecstatic. Those from the north, born in the 80s, dream of this moment as the major nation declares war against the South. They have waited for this day for decades. For years, the North has specialized in military and political affairs, building an army of 1.2 million and 4.7 million reserves. Their plan is straightforward. They know they cannot defeat the enemy, but they at least want to ensure they can overcome the South, threaten their stability, and relieve pressure on their leader. Once their leader secures East Asia, with their leader's benevolence, the North will also benefit from development. The South mocks their current poverty, but the North sees the South's lack of understanding. With the power of the dragon, they are directly taking off. Therefore, upon learning that the major nation has defeated the enemy's main force, without hesitation, the entire army of 1.2 million is mobilized to march south. What? Concerns about the rear? Their leader, the enemy's navy, is in a vacuum in East Asia, and they have the major nation and the big neighbor behind them. What concerns could they possibly have? In such a small area, rocket artillery can reach the capital of the puppet regime, and with the navy inactive, the 1.2 million troops will flatten the South. They have waited 70 years for this day. With both leaders taking action, it's time to follow suit. The more intense the fighting, the greater the contributions, and the more developed they will be after the war. Charge. In the capital of the South, Tokyo, a super metropolis with a population of over 30 million and the most prosperous city in the region, pedestrians now look up at the sky in terror. This afternoon, the major nation officially declared war on the invading South and its ally. Just 20 minutes later, air raid sirens echoed throughout Tokyo. The piercing sound of the air raid siren startled everyone finishing work. What is that sound? An air raid siren? Is the major nation attacking us? Help, help. Look, there are our fighter jets in the sky. Are we saved? The originally panicked crowd saw the F-2 fighter jets flying overhead and felt a sense of relief wash over them. However, their expressions did not last long. The once piercing air raid siren suddenly cut off as if it had malfunctioned. The F-2 fighter jets in the air also abruptly halted, appearing to lose control. With their bodies shaking uncontrollably, a sudden, rapid impact tore through the air, striking the fighter jet above the city. Boom. The F-2, which was originally seen as a savior, burst into sparks in midair. Debris, engulfed in flames, felt like a meteor shower. How could this happen? Ah, help, help. Instantly, people below in the city screamed in terror. A gray-black aircraft, with a low humming engine like a dragon's roar, glided silently over the skyline, reflecting a sharp, cold light. The belly of the plane bore a radar-evading star emblem, resembling a fighter jet from the future. Tower, this is Flying Eagle. I have flown from the southern Allied base to above the designated area. The electromagnetic pulse has already crippled the enemy's air defense, and I am ready to coordinate with the Navy for an offensive. I am now over the capital. On board, the pilot, with a detached expression, quietly observed the position of Kadenkata and Chiyoda on the display screen. The tower has received your message, Flying Eagle. Continue the assault. The Falcon Squadron is following up. The mission is to destroy the military bases in Yokosuka, Yokodo, Zama, and Atsugi. Remember to control casualties. Understood. The pilot smirked at the mention of controlling casualties, glancing at the Kadenkata position, feeling even more irritated. So this is the Yasukuni Shrine, huh? I'm a local here, and now you're in my hands. I'm not letting you off easy. With that thought, his hand moved to the missile launch button. Without hesitation, he pressed it 4 times in quick succession, targeting the Kadenkata position. For shots fired. Chapter 61. Advance, Ryukyu. In a certain defense headquarters, Fred suddenly felt as if the entire world had changed. He looked at the battle report in his hands, feeling dizzy. How could this be? Our unbeatable navy has lost half its forces and captured another half. With 120 warships, surely one could have escaped? Roaring in frustration, Fred slammed the report down onto his desk. His eyes widened in anger. They are all a bunch of fools. Mr. President, we need to clarify that the enemy has used a new conceptual weapon, the defense minister, sitting beside him, said seriously, though with a hint of fear in his eyes. A new conceptual weapon? Fred couldn't believe it, his eyes bulging as he shouted. What weapon could possibly cause our invincible navy to suffer such losses? Calm down. Calm down. The defense minister, Vano, could no longer tolerate this president. This fool only knew how to shirk responsibility when things went wrong. With a loud bang, the burly Vano stood up straight, his eyes glaring at Fred like a wolf, shouting back. It's an electromagnetic pulse weapon that can instantly revert all of Tokyo to the 18th century. You fool, don't forget. It was you who wanted us to start this war. Now, Fred, we have lost. Our navy has suffered severe losses in the South China Sea. The countries that have been oppressed by us have risen up against us, and our nation is on the brink of collapse. And you, instead of thinking of a solution, are here blaming others. After shouting out his anger, Vano ignored the stunned Fred and immediately ordered his deputy, reprimanding him. Organize the remaining navy right away. We can no longer hold East Asia and the Middle East, but at the very least, we must maintain control over Western Europe. Move quickly. Yes. The deputy immediately saluted and rushed outside. Vano watched his figure leave and let out a long sigh. It was as if he saw the end of a certain major power, losing hegemony, losing the ability to project war abroad, with domestic contradictions already dangerously explosive. How could they be suppressed any longer? We have completely lost. Fred had calmed down at this moment. His face was pale, and his lips trembled. He didn't even dare to step out of the Ministry of Defense, nor could he return to the presidential residence. At this moment, he could hardly imagine the situation within the nation. Crash. Fred, get out here. This was the greatest humiliation since the establishment of the nation. On the streets, citizens who had seen the news through various channels rushed out of their homes in anger. They took to the streets, furiously smashing everything in sight. Fires blazed to the gates of the presidential residence, with crowds gathering numbering over 100,000. Although the media had maintained silence that morning and dared not report on the defeat, not reporting did not mean the situation didn't exist. With the rise of short videos and social media, traditional media could no longer control the narrative. Such a significant event, 5 aircraft carriers, 5 cruisers, and over 10 destroyers captured. How could it possibly be kept hidden? People found it unimaginable and difficult to comprehend. Just yesterday, they were citizens of the most powerful nation, enjoying the title of the world's #1. And today, it seemed as though the situation had reversed. The great power across the ocean had nearly annihilated their fleet, and the entire world had begun to turn against them. It was as if they had become the target of everyone's scorn. Citizens could not understand or believe it. They took to the streets, storming the presidential residence. They wanted to drag out Fred, the one responsible for all this, and hang him. They foolishly believed that if they hanged the culprit Fred, perhaps the nation's previous status could be restored. Hanging Fred, the nation could not decline like this. That damned great power from the East stole our wealth. We cannot surrender. We cannot lose. No, it's impossible. We cannot fail. Among the crowd, there were those who viewed the nation as their faith, kneeling in despair. There were angry citizens wielding hammers, crazily destroying things inside the presidential residence. But regardless of their actions, this time, the nation was powerless to turn the tide, because countries around the world opposing hegemony had begun their attacks. This is the trend of the world. The global situation is tumultuous. Those who follow the trend will thrive, while those who oppose it will perish. The amphibious assault ship, designated 075, has appeared near the location of certain military bases. A kinetic projectile has severely incapacitated much of the facilities there. Although all electronic components have failed, landing on the island remains a challenging task, as machine guns and shells do not discriminate. On board, Captain Xueping stood resolutely at the command center, while information personnel compiled updates from various locations. This is Feehan. We have penetrated into the capital city, and hey, this guy just blew up a significant landmark. The message continued. Here is Nanhai, Feehan. He's a local. I can understand that. Upon hearing this news, Xueping felt a rush of exhilaration and agreed with the actions taken. Well done. That is refreshing. Our next wave of attacks will arrive soon. What is the intention from above this time? With the electromagnetic pulse weapons, the enemy has no air defense to speak of. The Air Force and Naval Aviation units can operate freely. So, Feehan has nothing to worry about. Instead, they discuss the mission here. I estimate the goal is to capture the location and restore the local governance. Xueping was not particularly concerned about the island capture operation. Gripping his binoculars, he casually remarked, Feehan, just take out the enemy's main firepower and leave the rest to the landing troops. It's time to show them what mechanized warfare really means. The roar of jet engines grew increasingly louder as a formation of aircraft flew low overhead, each carrying a terrifying number of ground attack missiles. Artillery and missiles were all directed towards the beach, shaking the entire island. In an instant, it felt like an earthquake was upon them. Hold on, hold on. They are definitely going to assault the island. Hang in there. Robert, trembling from the shock, shouted orders to the distant soldiers. Utilizing their entrenched positions, they withstood the enemy's ground attacks. After a prolonged silence, Robert cautiously crawled out of the foxhole, peering over the trench to take a timid look at the sea. However, as he extended his head, his pupils shrank in disbelief at the sight of the enemy forces landing on the beach, gasping, how is this possible? What on earth are those things? What are we fighting against? Chapter 62. Let me show you what mechanized landing looks like. Robert, with his head over the trench, was shaken to his core by the scene before him. Were they not fighting against a major power from the east? But who could explain to him what these things were? On the sea, a swarm of landing craft was approaching the beach. On the shore, landing boats had already made it onto the sand. But what disembarked from the landing craft were not soldiers, but an uncountable number of mechanical dogs. The four-legged robotic dog was developed by a certain country's academy, utilizing advanced technology from the wandering Earth world and AI-enhanced mechanical arm technology. It features an extremely advanced friend or foe identification system, capable of all-terrain movement, with a maximum speed of up to 50 kilometers per hour. Most importantly, it is equipped with a 58mm assault rifle and carries 2 thermobaric grenades. This is the key to success in beach landings and urban warfare. In the past, beach landings and urban combat were essentially meat grinders for ground forces. But now, when this country takes action, it aims to send a message. Times have changed. Are you still using traditional landing methods? Outdated. As the landing craft approached the beach, its doors opened, and a swarm of robotic dogs surged out without hesitation, charging straight toward the trenches and defensive fortifications. Fire. Everyone shoot. Robert, witnessing this scene, felt a wave of despair. Are we really fighting against a major power in the east, and not some aliens? Rat-a-tat-tat. Grabbing his machine gun, Robert had no choice but to shoot. However, the next moment, something even more terrifying happened. The robotic dogs, which he remembered as slow and clumsy, were now moving at an incredible speed, almost as if they were on drugs. He couldn't hit them at all. The entire battlefield was filled with these mechanical dogs, all sprinting toward the front lines like hounds on the hunt. They were clad in bulletproof, special steel, advancing through the rain of bullets. Buzzing. The sound of engines roared through the sky like the wails of death. Robert, holding his machine gun, felt an overwhelming sense of despair. Those were the enemy's ground attack aircraft. Using robotic dogs for beach landings meant there was no need to worry about friendly fire. It was a direct bombardment. How could Robert defend against that? Should he use his own head as a shield? Or sacrifice the lives of his precious soldiers for a machine that could be produced on an assembly line in just a few minutes? Boom. Ground missiles hit the ground. And Robert urgently ordered his soldiers to take cover in the bunkers. Boom, boom, boom. Outside the bunker, artillery and missiles rained down. Inside, the ground shook. And dust flew everywhere. Help me, help me. A young soldier was pinned under a collapsed beam, desperately crying out in pain, venting his despair and confusion. Fuck, what are we even fighting against? At this rate, we can't win. It hurts. His desperate cries ignited a wave of hopelessness among the soldiers in the bunker. Thinking of the swarm of robotic dogs advancing outside, Robert felt an endless fear wash over him as he guarded the entrance. He remembered seeing the amphibious assault ship from the East forces on the sea. They had already landed, and recalling the inexplicably malfunctioning radar and electronic equipment. He was certain that their fleet was likely finished. So, they are really just cornered beasts fighting back. How about we surrender? Amidst the many terrified tremors, Robert's voice gradually grew firm. The enemy's combat power was overwhelming for them. Moreover, they had no naval support. Trapped on a lonely island with no assistance, how could they possibly fight? As soon as he said this, there was an instant silence in the bunker. Let us surrender. Agreed. The soldiers, who had lost all fighting spirit, immediately raised their hands in agreement. Thus, just as numerous mechanical dogs were almost charging into the trench, a long wooden pole extended from the bunker, with a white cloth hanging from it. Robert raised his hands high, holding the white flag. He stepped out of the pit with the soldiers who were also raising their hands in surrender. Before him were hundreds of mechanical dogs. Robert's forehead instantly broke into a cold sweat. He forgot to consider whether these metal beasts would recognize the surrender. However, he was relieved to see that these mechanical dogs did acknowledge the surrender. The hundreds of mechanical dogs merely aimed their cold muzzles at them. Then, they parted to make a small path. Robert could only brace himself and lead the others out. The date was now December 28th. It had only been 3 days since the Eastern Power declared war on the three nations. Victories were being reported from various fronts. First was the main battlefield in East Asia. The opposing force was completely unable to resist, and significant territories had been regained. Next was the southern region. Although the northern faction's equipment was not the most advanced, the peninsula was small, and without assistance, they were easily overwhelmed. They had already been pushed back by 100 miles, losing more than half of their territory. Then, to the north, the large nation took advantage of the distraction to launch a major counteroffensive, advancing over 100 miles. The white faction suddenly gained momentum, leaving the entire Western world in confusion. Because the Eastern Power had not made a statement after the severe blow to the other side, the NATO countries were too afraid to act, merely watching as Poland was heavily battered. In just 3 days, they were almost at the capital of Poland. Finally, in the Middle East, without naval forces present, who could still resist? Just the weak faction. The resistance forces, along with the Pearl Party, swiftly moved south. Syrian militias and armed groups surged onto the Golan Heights, and the armed forces in Yemen launched furious bombardments on the weak faction and merchant vessels. This siege directly left the weak faction dazed. Even the richest factions were constantly trying to appease the Eastern Power. In an instant, the influence of the other side seemed to be on the verge of being swept off the Eurasian continent due to the sudden assault in the South China Sea. A sea power, suspended outside the center of world civilization, was draining the blood of the entire world. However, once their navy was incapacitated, they would immediately become an isolated island. Seemingly aware of this, the other side began to act frantically. On the 29th, they issued a statement that implied a nuclear threat against a certain Eastern Power. In response, the Eastern Power and the large nation joined forces and intensified their offensive. Ridiculous. Who doesn't have nuclear weapons? The urban population is so high. It should be you who fears a nuclear strike. If you want to back down, just say it straightforwardly. If not, then continue being so arrogant, and you'll get what you deserve. Seeing that the nuclear threat is completely ineffective, Fred can only send more troops to Western Europe while urgently conveying a willingness to negotiate. After all, he wouldn't be foolish enough to start a nuclear war. Please. On the other side are 2 nuclear powers. Who do you think you're fighting? You should be the one getting hit. Fred is looking forward to vacationing in Hawaii next summer. Chapter 63. Talks are beneficial, but have nothing to do with the dogs. On the afternoon of December 31st, the president of the nation, Fred, calmed the riots in Washington, showing goodwill and expressing hope for a quick negotiation. The location for the talks was set in Tokyo. The nation would send Defense Secretary Vano to personally attend, alongside the Defense Minister of the Eastern Major Power, Lei Yunshan. The Eastern Major Power gladly accepted this. After all, the nation is still a nuclear power, and it would be sufficient to drive them out of East Asia. One must remember that a desperate enemy can be unpredictable. Therefore, it's important not to push too hard, Getting enough benefits and withdrawing when the time is right is more practical. The negotiation was scheduled for January 1st, the first day of the new year. This day is destined to be remembered in history, because East Asia is once again welcoming its emperor. According to the Defense Ministry's announcement, communication in Tokyo has been urgently restored, and tomorrow, the two countries' defense ministers will discuss matters at the National Diet Building in Tokyo. Correspondents stationed in Tokyo stood on the streets, holding microphones, excitedly introducing the buildings behind them. This negotiation is not only about discussing a ceasefire, more importantly, the ministers will renegotiate the legitimacy of the San Francisco Treaty. This treaty was signed unilaterally by the nation with the UK, France, and Germany, disregarding the nation as a victor of World War II. The government refuses to recognize it. Correspondents have received some insider information and are filled with excitement and enthusiasm. In fact, based on the laws following the end of World War II, the Eastern major power could argue that Tokyo is not a sovereign state at all because the nation has not recognized the San Francisco Treaty. The treaty contains many provisions, but two are particularly noteworthy. First, the nation's trusteeship over Tokyo. Second, the issue of military presence in Okinawa. The first point can be negotiated, but the second must be resolved. This is non-negotiable. According to the Cairo Conference and the Potsdam Declaration, the issue of the southeastern islands must be addressed. As one of the victors of World War II, both the nation and the Eastern major power have a say. Moreover, even if the first point is agreed upon, the Eastern major power has conditions. That is, the nation must have rights similar to the nation in terms of military presence and airspace delineation in Tokyo. In fact, even now, the nation still holds airspace rights over Tokyo. Even during the Tokyo Olympics, it was only after the Tokyo government made multiple requests that permission was granted for civilian aircraft to fly over Tokyo under the military's controlled airspace. Since actions have been taken by one country, the other country will respond in kind. It is a simple statement. The involved nation should adhere to international agreements. While the Eastern power demands the restoration of its military presence rights in the region as granted by the relevant authority, this is a fundamental requirement for negotiations. Upon seeing the news about renegotiating the peace treaty, there was a surge of excitement domestically. Previously, due to lack of strength, everything was left to the management of the other country. But now, if they can advance, so can we. We also want to secure a position in the region. This news quickly became a hot topic online, sparking extensive discussions. It is crucial to emphasize the first island chain. Once we move beyond the first island chain, the other country will be completely out of East Asia. Ha ha ha. This way, we will no longer be constrained. The focus of this negotiation will certainly be here. What if the other side does not agree? Right, what if the region does not agree? Those up there are overthinking it. Would the other side dare to disagree? They have suffered such a heavy defeat on the battlefield. If they do not agree, we will fight until they do. As for the region, who cares about their opinion? When major powers clash, smaller nations should stay out of it. No, that's an insult to smaller nations. They shouldn't even be at the table. Ha ha. The comments up there are sharp. They shouldn't even be at the table. Just one word. Absolutely not. Amazing. There are so many talented people online. Furthermore, with the Eastern power and the other country announcing the start of peace talks, globally, all resistance movements are halting their operations. In the Middle East, groups like the Resistance Army, various militia, and even those oppressed in other regions have suddenly ceased their offensives. In South America, smaller nations have also quieted down, waiting silently. The flames of war around the world have instantly been extinguished. It seems as though the world has returned to a harmonious, peaceful state. However, everyone knows they are waiting for the final outcome, the result of the peace talks. Whether the world continues down the path of war or maintains peace will depend on the negotiations in Tokyo on January 1st. The world's attention is focused here. On January 1st, in Tokyo, at the National Assembly building of the region, a representative arrived by car. He looked up at the drones circling in the sky and wondered what they were for. His aide quietly replied, "Minister, the Eastern power has launched electromagnetic pulse missiles in Tokyo, paralyzing the entire city. These drones are emergency communication devices deployed by the other side for the peace talks." Electromagnetic pulse missiles. At the mention of this term, the representative's face turned pale, and he felt some resentment. If it weren't for such weapons, perhaps he could have arrived in the capital of the Eastern power with his head held high, rather than arriving in this state. How frustrating. He pounded the armrest heavily and took a deep breath, continuously persuading himself. He must endure, he must endure. The situation is stronger than the individual. The other side still has a technological advantage and 6 aircraft carriers. As long as they find a way to counter that electromagnetic pulse weapon, they can make a comeback. Holding on to this hope, the convoy arrived at the National Assembly building. This was a closed-door meeting, and reporters were not allowed to enter. Van der Mai stepped into the negotiation room and immediately spotted Lei Yunshan sitting upright. The room was arranged with a negotiation table set for 3 parties, with Lei Yunshan sitting at one side and the opposing parties positioned directly across from him. Notably, the prime minister of a certain country was seated at the third side, in the middle between the two parties, looking somewhat apprehensive. "General Van der Mai, welcome." Lei Yunshan said this welcome phrase with a straight face. It was clear that he was merely being polite, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This left Van der Mai momentarily speechless. Really? We are adversaries here, not attending a tea party. However, given the circumstances, Van der Mai, though frustrated, had no choice but to return a smile and took his seat. With all 3 parties present, Vandermeij paused for a moment. Wait, ISNT, there's supposed to be a fourth party in a conflict? Oh, the southern faction has been pushed to their capital and is in a precarious situation, so they don't need to be considered. The much-anticipated peace talks officially began. Chapter 64. Results of the talks. New landscape. On the afternoon of January 1st, 2024, Vandermeij hurried out of the legislative building of a certain country, his expression extremely grim, with hints of anger visible on his brow. In his haste down the stairs, he slipped and fell. Minister. Two aides rushed to assist him. Click, click. Journalists gathered outside captured the moment, furiously snapping photos. Their keen instincts told them this was going to be explosive news. As the journalists from a certain country clicked away, they couldn't shake the strong sense of déjà vu. Wasn't this just like the fall of a certain prominent leader? After the Falklands War, the atmosphere in a certain nation was at a high point, and during discussions about the sovereignty of a certain territory, they were arrogant and overbearing. But in the end, a strong response of this issue is non-negotiable. Brought it to a close. At the end of those talks, that leader had a gloomy expression and famously stumbled outside the hall. Now, the same was happening with the defense minister of a certain country. History truly has a strange way of repeating itself. This was a fall of a loser. Mr. Vandermeij, can you comment on the progress of the talks? Mr. Vandermeij, is the world inevitably heading toward war? Mr. Vandermeij, will peace endure? As Vandermeij was helped up and approached, the reporters surged forward like sharks smelling blood, bombarding him with questions. Get away, Vandermeij shouted in anger, his mood extremely foul. He swatted away a nearby journalist, and, with the assistance of his aides, returned to his vehicle and drove away from the scene of disappointment. From his actions, it was clear that the talks had concluded, and the outcome was extremely unfavorable for a certain country. With no news to report, the journalists could only focus on the image of the fall. Thus, a headline quickly emerged around the world. Vandermeij's fall. The era of hegemony has come to an end. Negotiations have not gone well, and the situation has left Vano in a panic. The fallout from Vano's misstep has stripped away the last semblance of dignity. As the talks take a strange turn, war seems imminent. The entire world is now focused on Tokyo, where news spreads rapidly across the globe. However, Vano's panic is not the most shocking part of the story. Shortly after this news broke, official media from both parties simultaneously announced the results of the negotiations. Effective immediately, the two countries have declared a ceasefire and restored diplomatic relations. The other side has promised to return jurisdiction over certain territories. At the same time, an old treaty has been abolished, and one party has recognized the sovereignty of another, albeit with certain military stipulations in place. Additionally, from this day forward, the other side will no longer recognize a certain regime and will transfer its management to a different entity. The content of the negotiations is extensive, but it ultimately boils down to one thing. The other side is being told to leave East Asia. From now on, East Asia will be under the control of a particular nation. We have won. Celebrations have already begun online. This is a victory that will be recorded in history, establishing a major power's dominance in East Asia. Everyone has seen Vano's blunder, right? The sense of déjà vu is strong. The decline of an empire. A stumble reminiscent of historical events? It's astonishing how quickly the global situation has changed in just half a month. Regardless, it feels incredibly satisfying to finally deal with certain parties. Let's go check the international reactions and enjoy the spectacle. Who will dare to boast about certain entities now that their status is crumbling? By the way, shouldn't we be discussing military presence and the restoration of certain territories? With these territories secured, the first island chain is no longer a constraint. January 1st will be a day more vibrant than any celebration. As we welcome the year 2024, East Asia will also witness the resurgence of former powers. The entire landscape of East Asia and even the world will change as a result. Furthermore, after Vano's return, there were immediate developments. Remaining forces were mostly redirected to Europe, leaving only a few for homeland defense. Having lost East Asia and half of the Middle East, they cannot afford to lose Western Europe as well. Following the announcement of the negotiations, some eager participants quickly decided to submit documents to a larger power, effectively seeking to align themselves. Their leaders have conceded defeat. Lacking resources, they cannot contend with northern powers. It is better to seek a strategic buffer, allowing them to benefit from both sides rather than face hardship. The southern entity has finally completed its unification efforts, resulting in a gradual cessation of conflicts worldwide. Even certain factions are no longer daring to act out. A new world order is taking shape. Below the Shishan base, the joy on Zhao Guangyao's face is unmistakable. The results of this battle are truly astonishing. We won, and it went surprisingly smoothly. Looking at Fang Jing, his eyes were filled with intense enthusiasm. This time, being able to force a certain country to back down with overwhelming strength relied entirely on electromagnetic pulse weapons. Thanks to this kind of weapon, our nation is practically delivering a crushing blow. Those military forces are nothing but insignificant. Xiaofeng, your contributions this time are immense. Zhao Guangyao patted Fang Jing's shoulder vigorously, almost wanting to pull him into a dance. He was visibly excited. Our nation's rise has long suffered humiliation and oppression, but now, we have finally washed away that disgrace. It's all thanks to the efforts of the 237 project team. While feeling proud, Fang Jing also remembered to respond politely. His gaze was fixed on the television in front of him, watching as the bright red flag was raised at the military base, bringing a wave of relief to his heart. especially as images of the destruction of a certain shrine spread. The resentment that weighed heavily on every citizen's heart has finally dissipated significantly. Fang Jing couldn't help but want to recommend a heavy medal for the pilot who accomplished this task. It was incredibly satisfying. Well done. Furthermore, the reckoning with that certain country is not over. This is just the beginning. For a nation still steeped in militarism, when our country dominates East Asia, they will be the first to face consequences. We've been too polite. Xiaofang, train hard. The lunar base plan has been approved. Zhao Guangyao's gaze was intense. With just the technology of the Wandering Earth project, our nation has already stood out in the universe. He is now extremely eager for more advanced technology. Those in power feel the same way. Having tasted success, the originally cautious conservatives immediately nodded in agreement. Now, the priority of the 237 plan